Good evening all. My name is Councillor Paul McPherson. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee, and welcome to everybody tonight. Nice to see a lot of our residents out. We've got a full agenda tonight, so we want to get right at it. There is a regrets from Councillor Pachariva, so we'll do a quick roll call of council and staff. So tonight, to my left, we have Mayor Easton. We have Councillor Diane Regima. To my right, we have Councillor Rob Foster, Councillor Dave Thompson, Councillor Lynn Timbers, and Councillor Tony Brunet. Staff here tonight, to my immediate left, we have our CAO, Mike Kirkopoulos. Along the back table, we have our Economic Development Officer, Paul Deaney. We have our we come down here a bit. Our Associate Director of Planning and Development, Matt Bruder. We have our Acting Associate Director, Recreation, Culture, and Special Projects, Sarah Ann. And in the audience, we have many more staff. We have we have Angela Safani. I saw her up in the corner there. She's right over there, our Director of Finance and Administration. We have Matt Guadagnolo, our Help Desk Analyst from IT. We have, and I missed Dave over in the corner here, we have Shannon McKay, our Acting Director of Community Services. And we also have Dave Warden, our Manager of Parks and Facilities. So you can see we've got a lot of reports that touch a lot of departments here tonight. So, and over in the corner, pardon me, David, but we have Dave Graham, our Director of Public Works. And I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce out here in front. It takes a little getting used to seeing you two out front here. We have Julie Kirklos is our Town Clerk to my left, and we have Trish Sarnicki, who's our Deputy Clerk. Okay, so next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Seeing none. Confirmation of agenda. We do, as I mentioned, have a full agenda this evening, and there are some changes proposed to accommodate those presenting as well as audience members. We will hear, and this is a recommendation, we will hear from the delegations as listed regarding Cultural Master Plan and the Village of 100. And then we propose to Council that we move the report PW 18-23 Ulink Transit Pilot Quarterly Update up to accommodate those that are in attendance tonight, not putting them through the whole evening of agenda items. And after which we will move to hear delegation Sierra Planning and Management Consultants and Global Investment. And lastly, from delegation, Dr. Ray Darchie and Stephanie Hicks from Downtown Beamsville BIA. So what is the pleasure of the committee on the proposed changes? Are we good with that? All good? All good? Thank you. Okay, duly noted. So first up for delegations, we have 4 this evening. This evening we have Steve Langlois, Monteith Brown Planning Consultants presenting an update to the Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan. Steve, please come forward and proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. I'm pleased to be here tonight. I'll be presenting an update to really the town's first Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan. Given your agenda, I will race through this. We'll take, if it's your pleasure, we'll take some discussion or questions at the end. I'm pleased to be part of a team that's well-rounded, that brings a number of consultants that your community has worked with in the past, as well as some fresh ideas through the team. Monteith Brown Planning, we bring over 40 years of experience in the sector to the town. We've worked with the town. It's been several years ago now, but we're pleased to be back We're also, you might see us out at some of our public information sessions. You may also see Tucker Reed and Associates, Wickens Green Space, and Watson and Associates, who've worked on several of your financial projects in recent years. So it does take a large team to pull together a project like this. I will provide you with a brief introduction to the process. The master plan itself is a 10-year plan. It's intended to establish priorities and guide decision making for your community, for council, for staff, for stakeholders within the community. It will focus on a number of key objectives. Those include making strategic investments to ensuring a healthy community, improving quality of life, and encouraging a strong economy and sustainable environment. We know that parks, recreation, and culture are all very big pillars to achieving what you're trying to establish as a growing community. Now, in terms of scope itself, we will be examining service levels across all areas of the town in the following areas: parks, open space and trails, recreation, sport and cultural facilities, programs, events, activities, operations, financial and implementation strategies. So a lot of these are public-facing items. Some of them are also more internal, whether they're different practices and mechanisms for how you deliver service, and those will be equally important for you as you continue to move through the years. A few key objectives that will help us keep us on track. We'll be establishing an overall vision for parks, recreation, and culture within Lincoln, engaging the community in an inclusive and productive process that supports the master plan, identifying needs based on changing demographics and participation trends, developing strategies to meet identified needs and future directions, as well as aligning your efforts, operations, and budgets through priority setting. So with that, we are just getting started, if that hasn't been apparent. Just getting our feet wet and on the ground, I suppose. So we're really entrenched in that phase 1 background review. I'll touch on what will be important for this group in a moment or two. We'll talk about the public engagement process, and that's a key part of where we need to start in learning more about your community, engaging your residents. But the new plan the plan itself in draft form will be coming in front of new council next year with conclusion prior to next summer. Just so you know, I think it's important to understand how the plan itself will take shape. I've mentioned a few of these already, but we do look very closely at these key building blocks of public and stakeholder engagement, demographics, growth, trends and usage data, existing policies, guidelines, as well as input through your inventory and asset management systems. We do as well. A key starting point for us is to look at what's already in place. And some of that is looking at leading sector-specific guiding documents, such as the National Framework for Recreation in Canada. That's something that more and more municipal councils are finding common language in, and it's allowing them to direct their investment and their resources to some key areas. So we'll be following that relatively closely and engaging staff, for example, in the next week or so on some discussions around that. There's other strategies that you'll see that were referred to as we go through the process, and certainly your municipal strategies report. So items that would have received public input over the years with relative to parks, recreation, we'll have an opportunity to pull those into the process as well. So I did refer to, skipped a slide here, engagement tactics. This will be launching very soon, so hopefully in September you'll be seeing a project website. There will be a project email for those wanting to provide some written comments. There will be public surveys. Those will be ongoing over the course of the next number of weeks. Some key stakeholder interviews and workshops. Those haven't been scheduled, but will be shortly. And my next slide will speak to some open houses that we'll be hosting, and all sorts of other internal consultation and community outreach. We've been excited to work with Sarah and group on the Spark Lincoln, the Youth Voice app that they had worked with over the course of the summer. So that will be an interesting input for us. Just a quick public announcement around our public information center. So these will be advertised shortly, but these will be hosted in the month of November, and we'll be having key open house dates throughout the community. An opportunity to meet the consultants and learn about progress so far. So with that, really just, I'll leave you a number of questions. We're not going to go through each of these one by one, but this is just a bit of a starting point, I think, for any comments or questions that council may have, any questions around the planning process, things that you think we should know as recreation and culture consultants coming into your community, and really just best advice moving forward as we embark on this exciting plan for the town.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions from the council?
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Thank you for the presentation. So the questions at the end did spark a couple of things I wanted to mention. As far as trends, and this is not something that's just happening in Lincoln, but the gig economy, we're finding more people are working from home. So I would think that would equate to a need for more recreation and more opportunities for people that are working from home to get to know and to people in their community and to tie into the community. So the gig economy, I think, is a trend that's relevant. And another trend that's relevant certainly in Lincoln is that people are moving from the city to come here. We meet them all the time, and they didn't even know that, for example, Beamsville existed, and now they've bought a house here and they've moved here. And I was speaking to somebody the other day that moved here recently from Burlington, and she's a young mother and she has some young children at home, and she's a little bit, I think, going through a little bit of culture shock, because she used to be able to step outside the door and just walk across the road and do anything that she wants with her children, kind of thing. Everything's within a few steps. And I think she was a little bit surprised. I think that they're happy here. But so that's another trend that I think we need to pay attention to, and I think that's really highlights the importance of this master plan. And I had a couple of comments about engagement in the community. I see that youth is in there, so very good, that's important. And we have a particular group of people out there that are raising money and paying a lot of attention to getting a skateboard park going. Right. I'm sure you're aware of them. But also our seniors. It's very important. We've got a lot of people in the community that are 65 and up, 55 and up. A lot of seniors moving here from the city and enjoying being able to sell their home elsewhere and maximize their profits and come here. But they're looking for something to do. They're looking for culture. They're looking for recreation. And another point I want to make, cultural diversity. We have also people moving from other areas, and we're seeing an increased diversity as far as culture is concerned. So we want to make sure that those people are engaged as well. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Timbers?
Thank you, Chair McPherson. The only thing that came to my mind is what we would like you to know about Lincoln, and what makes us unique is Lincoln is very broad, and it's made up of a lot of towns together and hamlets as well. We have a lot of people who live in the rural areas, so I would really like to make the point that the people in the rural areas need to be engaged and need to have access to, recreation and culture events as well. So that's my only point that I want to make, is to make sure we include the rural areas when we're looking across Lincoln. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timbers. Any other comments, questions, Mayor Easton?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the report. Whenever these reports come forward, and I guess because of what we've been hearing from staff that have come to the town recently, this is a much, much bigger pie than we ever invested in. And so there's a couple of things. I expect that the recommendations are going to be very extensive. But once this big document comes forward, and I call it a big document because it will have to be very comprehensive, what recommendations are generally time sensitive? Because we're going to have to work out an investment plan for this, and things don't stand still very long. How do you, what's your perspective on that? Do you make recommendations around that, or do you prioritize any of the recommendations?
Absolutely. That won't be an exercise we won't really be looking at till we get to phase 4. At this point, our early work is really going out to the community and trying to engage them on what they'd like to see, at the same time being careful around expectations, because that's usually something that, financially we don't want the plan to sit on a shelf, so financially it needs to be achievable. We'll be working with our partners on the team, with Watson and Associates, to not only prioritize but make sure that this fits and dovetails with your long-term capital budget, with development charge capabilities and other potential funding sources. There would be policy recommendations around alternate funding, and the priorities really become a matter of what you can sustainably fund from over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. And if outside funding becomes available, then that's something that could potentially elevate a priority, but priority setting is important to really actionizing the plan and making sure it works for you.
So we can expect as a council that with the involvement of Watson and Associates, that those recommendations and that the planning for the investments will be laid out to in a pretty finite way that will help us move forward. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chairman. I don't, maybe I need to just look at this now. It came to mind that the ministry is pretty interested in having these plans in place, but I don't see them as involved here, and I'm wondering what their relationship is to this program. Does it have any bearing at all on our ability to attract some of that third-party money in the future if we have this plan?
So was a question provincial government that you were referring to specifically?
Well, it could be the federal government if it's
Yep.
culturally related, but
And that's past senior levels of government, most recently in particular, have made it very apparent that having a plan in place is a precursor towards receiving grants. Making sure that you have your ducks in a row, that you know what your priorities are very important to an important consideration to them when they do provide those grant programs. So it is something that's more and more required, but no, it's unlike an official plan, for example. This is not a legislated document, but it's something that as we realize the impact that parks, recreation, and culture have on a community, it's good to provide. It's very valuable to provide your community with that voice and to identify those priorities moving forward.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, I'm interested to know whether you plan to quantify in any way what the economic development benefits are from having a comprehensive plan such as this.
I guess that is a good question. That would be something we'd take back to our committee and see if it's we can work with the resources that we do have in place. I think we need to have a plan, or at least the start of a strategy in place before we can really tackle that one.
Well, I'm a little bit surprised at that answer, but I'll just leave it with you, Mr. Chairman. My last question is around the whole idea of having more regional resources. To build anything now is very expensive for one community to tackle, and the operating costs are pretty substantial, as you can imagine. So in this report, do you take into consideration, in a theoretical way, what we should be looking at as far as looking at the whole West Niagara picture?
Absolutely. So we know you don't exist on an island. Municipally, as a lower tier you do, but people don't start and stop at your boundaries when they're seeking opportunities to participate. So understanding what is offered nearby, understanding who's using your facilities at the same time, and what those demands might be regionally is a key input into the process, particularly for some of your higher order facilities that will draw from beyond your boundaries or vice versa.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if you would just bear with me. I don't know whether this is common or not, but in the town of Lincoln, we have to have at least 2 of everything. or so it seems. Do you address that issue of consolidated communities and how to finesse the sharing of services and the complete town scenario?
We do, and each community is a little bit different, but we've worked in urban, rural, and amalgamated communities quite frequently, so that's an issue, a concern that's quite common in the municipal sector. And we do work to rationalize service delivery and facility and park delivery, so it's important that we understand what the distribution of those services and facilities are, and we try to establish appropriate catchment, appropriate service levels from one community to the next. It needs to be a Lincoln appropriate response though as well, so that's why you'll see we do place a big emphasis on community engagement early on.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Thank you very much for this report. I just wanted to make just a couple of quick comments. I'm sure, dealing with Sarah and with Shannon and our team, you've heard all this stuff, but I just wanted to make sure that as we move forward, people realize that we've got a lot of other moving parts. We have the transportation master plan that we're currently working on. We launched an active transportation committee for the first time in this community back in the fall of 2017, and we have a Conkle Creek remediation, and all these projects will speak to what we're trying to do, and that's connect communities, connect parks, connect neighborhoods, and get people out moving. So it's really great to see that we're launching this Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Master Plan at this time. I'm really happy to see that we're going to get the PIC public engagement done as quickly as possible, and November the 6th through the 15th certainly hits that timeline where we can get that community engagement and get because as the mayor just alluded to, one of the issues that we have is, we do have neighborhoods in this community that have been waiting for parks for 10 years. And, we tried to get a shovel in the ground on a particular park. We've had some delays, but we're going to get that shovel in the ground. But one of the things we did here at that public engagement is, you need a transportation master plan, or a Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Master Plan, because we can't be everything to everybody. We can't have a skateboard in every community park. We can't have a splash pad. So we need to get that engagement and really understand what the needs in those specific neighborhoods, and what these are community parks, and we have to remember that. The other thing I just want to mention, we've got the Canada Summer Games coming to Niagara in 2021, and we have some areas in our community that we need to look at desperately as that 2021 Canada Summer Games is looked at. So I hope we look at this. I realize this is a long-term sustainable plan, but we do have some things that we should be looking at through that lens as well. So thank you very much for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And my only comments, Steve, are changes. I'm sure you're aware of the growth that's going to happen here over the next 5 to 10 years, and taking that into account. And then with that, demographics and parks, specifically parks for all ages. And the piece of it was mentioned earlier. Some of our the average age of the Lincolnite, if you will, today, and then what it might be 10 years from now. So taking that into consideration, and I guess I'm interested in, you made a comment earlier, or maybe it was the mayor that made the comment about how do you control expectations, because you're kind of the kid in the candy store coming out to these public meetings and everybody wants everything. And how do you temper that, and I'm sure you and your organization do that all the time. So that are a couple of points. The comment about a large community geographically, and yes, we have been 4 communities or maybe 5 communities, all along. And how do we place key recreational, items in parks where the entire community can enjoy them? So some challenges there. And then I'm just interested in the culture piece and how what comes out of this from a culture standpoint. I'd be interested to see that. So just some comments for you, and thank you for your presentation tonight. Oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thought we were done.
Just a couple things, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Although Lincoln is a very different community, in your experience, do you have other communities that you'll be using as comparators to sort of allocate, you know, how many of this, how many of that is sort of the norm for a community of our size and of our demographics?
I think we'll be working to establish a list that really fits with your community. So, you know, key similarities, you know, waterfront communities, urban, rural mix, you know, perimeter to GTA. So, you know, checking off certain boxes I think will be important and population-wise to do that. At the same time, standards of provision in one community can vary quite substantially from one to the next. So that's not the only piece to the puzzle. That's, you know, if we were doing this plan 20 years ago, maybe, but they've become a little bit more sophisticated. So it is a consideration, but we want to make sure it fits with your economic capabilities and community needs.
Right, I just always like to see a comparator so that we kind of get
If
a sense.
there are some that you as a community tend to compare against, we can include those in an exercise.
Okay, and I'm really glad to see that the 4 meetings in the 4 different areas of town are being had from the public engagement standpoint. And I guess, you know, going along with the what you've done in other communities for these plans, I'm hoping that there's places you've seen funding opportunities, corporate and government, not necessarily just upper tier government levels, that pieces that can come into play. And I was going to go down the building with our municipal neighbors to kind of integrate those pieces, but the mayor already kind of went down that road, so thank you very much.
It's over to you.
Yeah, we're still getting used to this microphone system. I just wanted to make a quick comment on the fact that it's that we look for shovel-ready within the community. We've been very fortunate in the past. In Ward 1, Hillary Ball Park was, we received a huge grant a number of years ago to go and do work there, and an awful lot of our trails and through the community as well. But I think that's the critical part that has to come out of this, is the concept of shovel-ready to go after those grants that are possible. And I just want to echo what Councillor Thompson just said too. The fact that those 4 public meetings, I think those are going to be critical. And I also am hoping that it isn't just, you know, those big slabs that we have said are going to be parks, but I think we also need to be looking at what we've done with the creek over in Ward 1 as well. You know, like is that going to fit into our overall game plan? So anyway, thank you very much.
I think we're around the table now, so thank you, Steve, for your presentation, and hopefully you got some good feedback there. You guys kicked off. Oh, we have one other.
I just had one more, if you would indulge me, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
I love plans, but I'm just wanting to make sure that we have an action plan in place for all of this. You know, and strategically what steps we're going to take to move this forward. So I'm hoping that these consultants can assist us with that as well.
We want to do your next plan 10 years down the road as well, so we don't want it to sit on a shelf. We're in alignment.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a motion moved by Councillor Timbers, seconded by Councillor Brunet, that the presentation from Steve Langlois, Monteith Brown Planning Consultants regarding an update to the Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan be received for information. Your pleasure on that motion? That is carried. Next this evening, we have the Niagara Region staff to provide a presentation regarding Village of 100. We have Sinead McElhone speaking on behalf of the region. please come forward and make your presentation.
There we go. Okay. So thank you very much for having us here this evening. We really appreciate it. And so I'm here tonight with my colleague Rachel Skellett, who is an epidemiologist at Niagara Region Public Health, and I'm the manager of a team of about 12 people there. And also Dr. Andrea Feller has also joined us this evening in case there are any other questions. So and she has been an advocate for this project from the start. So again, thanks for having us here. So I'm just going to kick off quite quickly. So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover the Village of 100 concept and its importance. We're going to talk about the social determinants of health and health equity. Then we're going to talk about the census, and I'm going to be handing it over to Rachel, who has done a ton of work on this. And then we're going to go into Niagara's Village of 100 and Lincoln's Village of 100 as well, just to give you an idea of the breakdown of the data. So what is this Village of 100 concept? Now, it's been around for quite a while, and so what do we mean? And it has been around globally as well. So we've taken our ideas from other areas to produce these products. So it's been used globally as a way to visualize the world on a smaller scale and make it more meaningful. Okay, so it's what we try to do within health and public health is to try to make data more meaningful to people, to enable people to make better decisions, I suppose, or to really understand information and data. So, for example, the Village of 100, if the word were condensed to 100 people, 84 would be able to read and 14 would not, for example. Okay, so this has been adapted to other countries and communities as well. So other regions within Ontario have adopted this, so then we decided that it would be a really good way of presenting this information as well, and to make it more meaningful to people. So we first embarked on this project in 2015, just with the old census data, 2011 census data. And then once the new census data came out, we then started to upgrade and update all the products, and then to produce a variety of different products for each of the municipalities. So that's kind of the basic background to the Village of 100 concept. So why is it that looking at data from the census is actually so important? So well, we know what makes Canadians sick, and I always love this slide because it really shows you that like 25% of your health care is associated with your health and illness. 15% of your health is related to your biology, 10% your environment, but 50% is actually related to your life. So all of those social determinants of health, for example, you've got income, education, gender, race, housing, etc., all have a huge impact on one's health. So, so this is why we decided to incorporate as many of these variables as possible that come from the census within these Village of 100 products. Again, just to give you an idea of what's happening within your local areas. So again, just to talk about the social determinants of health, inequalities and inequity. So we know the social determinants of health are the conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live and age, and also the wider set of forces and systems shaping the conditions of daily life, like policy, like the built environment, all of those kind of things. So health inequalities, these are the differences in the health status experienced by various individuals or groups in society. So these health inequalities can be biological, they can be, due to your health, but generally speaking, it's the health inequities are the ones that we are most interested in. Because you can't really change your biology, I suppose. But health inequity is a subset of health inequalities, and these are the differences in the distribution of health status or health determinants between population subgroups, which are unnecessary, avoidable, unjust, and unfair. So we could actually do something about these. We could do something about these. We could fix these. We could make people kind of healthier and in the long run. So that's what the social determinants of health are all about, and again, very important to consider when thinking about health in general. So again, why do we use infographics? And very basically, this is from Public Health Agency of Canada. Infographics are just a story of numbers, and it's just a really great way of getting information out to people quickly so that they understand it. Highlights key findings in a concise and easy and visual way. And they are just, they tell the story. So infographics are a way to tell the story through visual communication. So I'm going to hand over now, I believe, to Rachel, who's going to carry on, because it was Rachel and, of course, a team of people who pulled all of this information together, and she'll be able to go into the background of this.
Thanks, Sinead. Okay, so just a quick background around the census. I won't take too long on this, but the census occurs every 5 years in Canada, and it's something that is distributed to all households and all residents are required to participate in. The census data is used for planning services in communities, so not just stuff that we're using it for from a health-related perspective, but for things like schools, daycares, police, and public transportation, basically all the services we have here today. We have our most recent census that took place in 2016, and the full kind of data set came available to us late 2017, early 2018, which is why we're here in 2018 delivering these data products to you. So there's two forms of the census, the short form and long form census, and we use data from both of these in putting our infographics and our data products together. So short form, just some very basic things, sex, age, date of birth, marital status, and income. The long form census has all of these as well, but does include some additional details such as language spoken, immigrant status, places of residence, education, employment, all these things that Sinead mentioned that we want to look at when we're talking about health inequities and things that we can do to improve health. Okay, so the reason why we do infographics is the data kind of comes to us looking like this. There's a lot of different ways you can manipulate it. You have to kind of really know your geography very well to know which ones you're looking at. There's a lot of different levels that exist. And what we're doing is basically taking these numbers, bringing them down to, if there's only 100 people, what would it look like, and making them a little bit more manageable. I'm picking some key indicators because there's a lot of indicators in the census. So this one here is just another example of some of the first official languages spoken and what the numbers look like for the region of Niagara versus Ontario. What we've done is created an infographic here for Niagara's Village of 100. This is the most up-to-date Niagara Village of 100 with the 2016 census. So as Sinead had mentioned, we had done this with the 2011 census data. This was our second go at it. We have updated all the numbers on there with the exception of a few that we've kind of swapped out. So we have indicators on population age. So we've broken it down into 4 different age bands, as well as kind of the median age of the municipality. Or the region in this particular instance. Gender breakdown, the most common visible minorities, variables on income, so there's a couple different ones. There's after-tax median family income, after-tax median family income for lone parent families. We also have an indicator that's a little bit related to income, but also housing, so it assesses what percentage of the population spends 30% or more of their income on their household expenses. We have immigration status, and then on the far right, there's a section in blue that just takes a look at the population of, if the population of Niagara was only those 15 and older, what would it look like from an education perspective, from an employment perspective, from a marital status perspective, and from labor force occupation perspective. This go around, we've also created ones for each municipality. So when we did our first go at the Village of 100, we had just done one for Niagara with the 2011 census data. But to really understand the municipalities that are part of Niagara, we wanted to actually further this. So we've created, in addition to the Niagara infographic, we've created the one for each of the 12 municipalities. So all the infographics have the exact same indicators on them. The only thing that really looks different is visually in the center, where we had the entire map of Niagara on the Niagara infographic. We now have a kind of zoomed in picture of that municipality. But everything else there's the same. So they're a great tool to look at, kind of compare between the different geographies and the whole of Niagara as well as individual municipalities. So we have also put all this data on the web. We have, if you're interested in receiving a copy of the infographic, we are more than happy to do that. We also have it on the web, so you can actually scroll through the different municipalities. There's some drop-down menus where you're able to click on different municipalities. The data will refresh, and you can get to see what all those look like. So we've created these for our own purposes, but also we're here today to share these with you and our community partners. So they can be used for things like grant applications, sharing information about your municipality with the media, conveying this information to other stakeholders that might exist in your community, and just in general to support decision making, because we always talk about making decisions with the best available data, and this is the most recent information we have. So thank you for your time. We'll take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions from the council? Councillor Timbers?
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I don't really have a question, but I just have a comment. I think this is great. It's fabulous. I love the infographics. It's such a great way to put out information and data that people can just look at it. And I saw a few surprises on the Lincoln's Village of 100. I couldn't wait to actually really look at all the details that were there. Our age demographic is a little surprising to me. And I just love it. I love what you've done, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the municipalities as well. So great job, and thanks for coming out tonight to go over it with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Mary Stan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is very interesting. You started out talking about what makes Canadians sick. And so should we assume that the 50% is about quality of life?
Yep. So yeah, that's Canadian specific data, and
Okay.
it's published by Canadian Medical Association.
Okay, and the amount of, the degree of emphasis on quality of life seems to be soaring at the moment. And why is that?
Well, I mean, there's so many things that kind of impact on your health and wellness. I mean, we're only just finding out things now related to, say, social connectedness and being involved in your community, social belonging, all of those things which are, I suppose, outside the realm of traditional health, I suppose. But these are all have a huge impact on one's health and well-being and their mental health and well-being.
Okay, so that's very helpful, because if we go back to Steve Langlois' presentation, I have to assume that there's a big connection here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But then, when you look at the graph that has the, where are we now? When we look at the graph that just looks at the Lincoln profile, this information is kind of dry. What I'm looking for is, what are we going to do with this? I mean, I think it's great that our male to female ratio is 48 to 52, because, when you have that kind of stability, then the sense of belonging improves exponentially, I'm assuming. But when you look at age, that starts to tell us a whole lot of things about what kind of services you're going to need in your community. So what would you recommend that we do with this information?
Well, I think it's a great conversation starter, to be honest, and I really love the questions that you're asking here today, because of course you can drill down further into the data. You could even do some mapping exercises. You could take a look at where you have kind of higher rates of seniors in relation to younger people, and then you can really think about what does your population look like, even from a geographic perspective, and then really think hard about your programs, your services, your planning, your transportation, your culture, all of that kind of thing. So absolutely, for most people, or for a lot of stakeholders, this is just a very nice product to take a look at. But you're absolutely right. I think it actually, you should ask more questions like this. You should ask for the deeper dive. You should ask for the breakdown of data from a census perspective. And I think to really drill down into that information to make it more useful to you.
Well, as you can see, we've probably already spent the equivalent of 3 new staff here with these reports that we're getting, because clearly you have to have interpretation in order to do it. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm really interested. I want to see what we can do with this data, because I think that without that data, without metadata, you're not going to make very good decisions in the future. So are you going to be around to help us with that? Because I don't see us hiring an epidemiologist soon.
Yes,
What's the plan? It can't just be nice information.
Well, the thing is, you do have this information at your fingertips, and I know that there's, you've got some very, very, clever people working here who can actually look at, we could obviously offer advice as well, but it's there, there's a ton of information within the census that you can actually go in and drill down yourself to look at this in more detail. But however, having said that, we would be more than happy to offer advice as well, because we've done this, we live and breathe the census, most days, and yeah, absolutely.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that if we don't do something like that we're going to find ourselves in the same situation as all governments do, and that is that because it's hard, the determinants of health get put aside. And I've seen that happen over and over. And so I think that if I like this kind of data. I think it's very good to dig down and understand your community better. But we also have to be realistic about what those points that are very sensitive, the ones that we can start looking at that will make a difference for people. Because we can't invest in everything.
No.
It's also a very hopeful document. I mean, there's some good data here. I think we're a pretty healthy community just by the numbers alone. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, it's just one of those things that we'll just have to see how we can incorporate it into our planning as we go along. But all very important. Thank you very much.
Well, to pick up on that a little bit, I can see this kind of information dovetailing very nicely into the report that we've got coming later tonight with the ECDEV, the Economic Development Strategy, and knowing all those things generally about our residents. I do have one question, and that is, what is your data set? So you're using the long form, obviously, for this information. So how many, would you know how many people that is in the Niagara region, and how many people you're looking at in Lincoln? Is that something that the data gives us?
Yeah, so I actually don't have some of the numbers here today because for our exercises, the purpose was actually to dwindle it down so it was only out of 100 and we weren't looking at some of the larger numbers, but they are all available. If I can kind of scroll back here.
And it's not critically important, but is it 1,000 out of Lincoln, or is it 12,000 out of Lincoln? I'm just trying to get a feel.
All residents are mandated, like all households receive the census.
But they receive one or the other, don't they?
One or the other, which
Right.
all have the those few indicators that I had listed here. So they all have sex, date of birth, age, marital status, income.
Okay, so
That
all
is
of those.
for all
And then
individuals.
for some of the other things, you're breaking that down into a smaller
Yeah.
set.
Yes, so this is just a quick snapshot, and so all of this is publicly available just through Statistics Canada. We just happened to pull an image that compares Niagara as a regional municipality to Ontario, but you can pull the same data for the census subdivision of Lincoln and take a look at the numbers there. That will give you an idea of all the raw numbers that we're looking at.
Very good. Any other questions? Well, thank you, ladies. It's always good to have public health from the region come and visit us and present. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Okay, I have a motion moved by Councillor Brennan and seconded by Councillor Timbers that the presentation from Niagara Region staff regarding Village of 100 be received for information. Your pleasure on the motion? That is carried. Okay, so next up we are going to move to the Ulink Transit Pilot and Quarterly Update Report, and we have the CAO and staff that are here to make the presentation. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will give the majority of the presentation, but Director Graham is also here, who will be able to answer any more operational questions. But I do want to start out before going through this presentation. We're going to talk about operations. We're going to talk about service delivery. But it's important, I think, for us to collectively remember that this type of service does make impact in our community. And so I do want to highlight the residents that are here this evening who've given up their evening to be here to offer their support. I am going to take you through a few individual stories. You do have on your tables some additional stories, some additional very personalized stories from some of our readers that I will try to refer to, but I will take you through the presentation as quickly as I can. I did want to start this evening by highlighting one story, and I can tell you that some of the residents who provided these testimonials are here this evening, and so I won't pick out and highlight them, but just know some of them are here this evening. In addition to that, some have anonymously also provided us some comments. They are clients of some of our various agencies and didn't want to release their names, so you won't see names next to everybody. There is one story here. It's what we refer to as Brenda's story. Brenda highlights her parents. She highlights the age of her parents. You see it here in front of you. I'm not going to read each and every one of them, but she talks about them stopping to drive. She talks about the importance of having the Ulink bus now available. She also highlights that she's in that position where she's got aging parents that she needs to care for, as well as a younger daughter who has a child who's living in the Fenwick area and are quite isolated because they don't have access to a bus. And so this is, I think, one of the many stories that we have. A number of you have heard me tell the story that when we first launched our Ulink bus service, we had two individuals around the same age, both in two different seniors facilities in our community, and who, as a result of not having that mobility freedom, weren't able to see one another. One was in their late 80s, one was in their early 90s. There was more of a happy ending when I told that story at the beginning, because on a every other day basis, they were able to get together, they were able to see each other at Conversations Cafe, which is one of our stops. Since that time, one has passed, but I can tell you that it continues to be one of the stories that I get a lot of stories. A lot of people share the impacts we make as municipal government, but that is one of the stories that I think touches me, because it allowed two individuals who didn't have a lot of time together to actually have a lot of time together because of a service that we provided. So I think it is one of those things that I always like to share. So complete communities. You've seen this slide before. Over this term of council, you've heard us talk about about complete communities many times. We've been in front of you. We've talked about the importance of affordable housing, about employment, quality education. You heard earlier today a presentation on recreation and parks, walkability. We've launched civic engagement initiatives. Today I do want to talk to you about the one item of that complete communities matrix that's there, and that is affordable transportation, which is a core factor. So why did we run this pilot? A number of you, whether Councillor Brunet, who chaired our Active Transportation Committee, or other members of council who have spoken on affordable transportation and transit before, will know the objectives of Ulink were to provide mobility to members of the community. Number two, facilitate economic development. And I know Paul and our consultants will talk about the importance of public transit as one of those key barometers from an economic standpoint, and how it hinders some of our employees from getting to where they need to be. So there's absolutely an economic development and labor workforce perspective. There's an importance around supporting future plans for sustainable development. Some of our intensification targets, some of the things that we've outlined and that planning's outlined in our official plan. Item 4, contributing to a higher quality of life. So the health and community participation rates and outcomes, and some of those things you did hear about in the previous presentation. And of course, supporting the introduction of the future GO train service to Lincoln. So what Lincoln had to say about Ulink. We've done a lot of consultation over the last number of months and throughout the 8 months that this pilot's been in place. As part of this public engagement, we also did a satisfaction survey. So I'm going to quickly take you through some of the information that we were able to yield through that survey. So the next few slides are some of the takeaways and relevant information that we are able to use as we look at this service and the continuation of the service. So customer satisfaction. What did we hear from residents? We heard about availability and reliability, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. The ease of use, information availability, and where people are hearing about Ulink from. The user experience, and one of our drivers is here this evening, and his customer service skills were highlighted throughout the consultation that we received, and of course safety and security. We also looked at ridership, and I did an analysis of our ridership, and so we tried to figure out what encourages or discourages riders from using Ulink. What were the demographics? And we've got some interesting trends to share with you. The ridership frequency, why people are using it, and of course the transportation types. So we had 162 responses. Those are both riders and non-riders that used our service. 20% of respondents, as you can see from this chart, were between the ages of 30 to 60, followed by 61 and older, being our next highest demographic of participants, and then 20 years of age being the one following that. About a 43 to 54 split of male to female respondents. So what did we hear? Why are people using Ulink? Some of it's to access healthcare. Some of it's to get basic necessities like groceries. As I highlighted with some of those stories, some of it's connecting and the ability for people to come together. Linkages to our Go Bus service. This council will know that over your term, you specifically looked and advocated for Go Bus service to be introduced in Lincoln. One of the things that folks at Metrolinx and MTO specifically highlighted was the importance of connections to that park and ride location. And so connecting to Go has been one of those elements that we've been able to do as a result of our Ulink service. And of course, getting to work. We do have people that work at the food complex here in Beamsville, as well as various other establishments in our industrial parks and across town. And so work was also one of those elements that people use Ulink to get to. So this validates, I think, a lot of the stuff that we heard and were the reasons why we introduced the pilot project. Riders choose Ulink because in some cases they don't have access to vehicles. There's a segment of our community from an environmentally friendly perspective that believe in transit and the importance of transit. Of course, the Go connection, if you're using Go to get to school or other locations, the transit linkage is important. It's an affordable option. In this case, we haven't been charging anything to date, so affordability definitely plays into it. And there's a safety element to it. It is an alternative to walking in a number of areas of town where we actually don't have sidewalks. So this is an affordable and safe alternative. So 3 areas were identified as the most important areas for our riders. Availability, and I am going to go into what I mean by each of these. Reliability and ease of use. So here's how we break down what folks had to say. I'll take you first to the 78%, which is the percentage of respondents that would recommend Ulink to others. I think anytime you have a service like this, and I would say that this is a very basic and rudimentary service, and I think that is a point that I want to highlight for council. When we introduced this, this was a very basic service. There is an adage, a saying that Metrolinx and Go have used across Niagara, that their job and what they want to do by introducing transit is to get bums in the seats. That is not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes time. You need to ready a community for transit, and I can tell you from a Go Bus and Go Train perspective, that is the similar mantra that we're hearing. But from an overall satisfaction perspective, you can see that 6 of the 7 categories people were satisfied in. So reliability, ease of use, the availability of information, so were they hearing enough about it, the user experience in terms of how they interact with us, and of course safety and security. Availability is where we scored neutral, and we will get into this in the latter few slides of the presentation. So does it service all the areas of our community? Is it coming as often as people would like? Is there enough stops across town? All those things when you look at a transit service that you often hear back. And I would say that whether you have an advanced transit service or a basic transit service, you're always going to have those questions around availability. So some conclusions in terms of what we heard and what we were able to summarize as a result of that consultation. Overall assessment of our routes and times and schedules. That was the area where we got the greatest feedback, but also the area where we heard the need to service areas. There's parts of Vineland, North Vineland, and Jordan that currently don't have the level of service or service at all, and people want some of that service. And of course, time of day adjustments. Again, I said at the beginning of the presentation, this was a very basic service. It operates between those times that I would say doesn't go late into the evening when it's dark. We are hearing from individuals who work at some of our food establishments who want us to go a little bit later, who are working till 9 or 9:30 and then need to close and do the basic things that they need to do, and then would love to have an ability to get back to town. We need to better align with GO, and so that's something we also heard as well. People want more connections to the GO bus service. Right now we have a few loops, and those loops are really functioning on an hourly basis. And I'm generalizing slightly. Some are a little bit more frequent, but for the most part they're functioning on an hourly basis. And I think at times you have to plan ahead, definitely. But some of the feedback we heard was aligning with our GO schedules if we look to continue the pilot and enhance it. And ensure one point of access for information about service disruption. So they're hearing different things. We've done a good job from a communication standpoint. Our website's become kind of that central point, but you can never communicate enough, especially on the service disruption side. So when we don't have a service, this past year we've had extreme weather conditions, and I would say both on the cold and hot side. And so as a result of that, that's also affected some of those service disruptions. So how do we communicate that? How do we make the service predictable for folks? So some ridership metrics. We've been functioning for a little under 8 months. We've had, by now, probably, from me presenting this, not a week ago when we did this presentation, probably closer to 2,000 pickups. We've had about 200 days of service. We're averaging about nine riders per day. We've had a high of 24 riders on some days. You can see the breakdown there in terms of adult, senior, and youth, and this surprised us a bit in terms of the way this composition is. I think most people assume youth and seniors are are those two highest quadrants or those two highest categories that you would see transit users in, but you can see from an adult perspective that is exactly the same as what we're seeing from a senior's perspective. So the majority of our riders are women, and the late morning, early afternoon time frame is our highest ridership. I think not surprisingly, Fleming is our busiest stop. It is our western central point where a lot of people do come and get picked up. That makes sense. We have a community center there, we have a library and all the other amenities there. Our most popular stops per route, Route 1 is Edelheim. Route 2 we see the Golden Horseshoe Estates being a very popular stop, and of course Route 3 is our Foodland location. So we also introduced a summer service. And from a summer service standpoint, you can see the data that's there as well. We had 56 total days of summer operation. We had 8 Saturday services available as well. And we had an average of 8 riders per day, with a maximum of 24 riders on one given day. And similarly on the Saturday, we had 13 riders per day, and Route 3 was the most used route from a Saturday perspective. So here are a few more stories that I thought were important to once again share with Council. I know we've got a very fulsome agenda. As much as I want to read each one of these, I will let Council look at them. I will let folks in the crowd look at them. We can share them, and they are attached to our report. But as you can see here, people talk about groceries. They talk about some of the basic necessities that they're able to go to as a result of our service. Dave's story here again talks about the importance of public transit. Talks about the change that's coming, kind of the car-centric societies that we currently have that we're starting slowly to move away from. It talks about seniors and age increases and the importance of accessing healthcare, shopping, and various other financial institution appointments. Connie, everyone knows Connie Groves. I don't need to highlight Connie. She couldn't be here this evening. She did want to be here this evening, but she did remind me to tell everyone knows who she is and knows very passionately and deeply her support for this service. She gives a little bit of a personal perspective there. For Connie, the one word that comes to mind is that social isolation piece. This service has allowed Connie to get out. It's allowed her to interact. Anyone who knows Connie knows she's got that infectious smile. She's got that infectious personality, and she is a town of Lincoln resource and gem, and gives it her all. And this service has allowed her to continue to contribute to her community. So, moving forward, there's 3 areas that we looked to council for direction on and hopefully approval this evening. One is to extend the service contract. Currently we are functioning in a pilot phase. We had anticipated ending this year, so we're before you to provide you an update as well as to seek permission to extend the service contract. Number 2, to establish a minimal rider fare, and I'll go into why that's important. And number 3 is a dedicated resource to manage that transit piece. And so that is a contractual type resource that is required, but something that can give this the attention that it needs. Right now, Director Graham, in addition to everything else he's doing, is trying to manage off the corner of his desk this service from an operational perspective with his team. And so some sort of resource is important to continue and to build this service. So we are recommending extending the current service contract for up to 1 year, at the very latest December 2019. And that does give us a chance to do a few things. We want to support transitioning the pilot to more of a permanent service. And by permanent, I don't want everyone to panic and say permanent means forever. Permanent means as long as we want it to be permanent. And the reason we're doing that is to leverage provincial gas tax funding. There is a formula from the province of Ontario that looks at ridership and population and provides us a 75% subsidy. So 75 cents on the dollar, which is an extremely good opportunity and an opportunity that allows us to lower the costs that we're currently putting out right now for transit services. Now, some are going to say, what if the government changes their funding model? What if they look at gas tax and decide to do something different? You'll see there that approving the extended service does not preclude us at any point in time to conduct a review in the future and to consider other alternatives. If we go away and we hear back from the province next month, 6 months from now, next year, that gas tax is no longer a funding envelope anymore, we will be before council immediately, and we will be sharing with council potential options to address any of that shortfall and or to cease service. I mean, at the end of the day, council will have a decision to make at that particular point in time, but we have no indication from any of the conversations we're having, both at a staff and a political level, that the gas tax is in jeopardy. You'll see from the report the 2019 net costs of $66,500. You'll notice the pilot costs were more. They were about $143,000, and that's over a 13-month time horizon. And so the reason for that is the 75% subsidy that we will get from the provincial government through the gas tax funding. The 2019 net costs do include enhancement to the operational service, some additional bus stop signs we need to do, that contractual piece to manage the contract and to do the outreach that needs to happen and the service, as well as any bus stop improvements that we need to make, and of course adjusting the routes, maybe putting in a few more stops and trying to address some of the comments that we heard. So that is the extended service piece. The rider fare, one of the stipulations that the province has for gas tax is the establishment of some sort of cost recovery option. We did have extensive conversations. Director Safani did, I did, our staff did, as it relates to eligibility criteria. So there must be some sort of cost recovery option. That is a minimal cost recovery option. As they highlighted, they understand this is a very rudimentary service. So we will be introducing and working with the community to set that minimal recouping, so introducing a rider fare. We've looked at a couple of different options, but we'll be before council with something like that early in the new term of council as it relates to the rider fare. We do look at implementing that fare hopefully in January of 2019. Again, we've, from a staff perspective, tossed around a number that we believe is probably fair, looking at the fact that this is a basic service and what we believe could happen from a round trip perspective. But introducing a rider fare would be something that we'd look at doing. And of course, as I highlighted, the importance of having some sort of contract resource to help manage this particular service that we're providing. This service would look at contract management. It would look at the service delivery improvements we need to make. It would develop some of those longer term recommendations we need to look at. It would focus on alignment and integration, both from a Go Transit perspective as well. Niagara region is looking at introducing some sort of transit service, transit provision here in West Niagara. It would coordinate with our AT committee, transportation master plan work closely with Dave and his staff. It would look at the various community assets, public education, and it is rare that we get a chance to use 75 cent dollars, 75% of costs of these sorts of things. In this particular case, this contracted service would also qualify for that 75% reduction. So I think anytime you're paying 25 cents out of every dollar for a service like that, whether that is a human service, an infrastructure service, it is something that is important to consider. It's something important to look at. But I understand, council wanting, in any particular case, anytime we look at any sort of human resource, to make sure that your hands aren't tied, to make sure that we're not committing to something forever and a day. And I can assure you, in any case, that if that 75% formula ever is in jeopardy, we will be back before you, telling you that and informing you that, whatever that transition period is at any particular point in time. So, from a summary perspective, I think we've demonstrated, and I think the community, more than we, has demonstrated the need for transit in Lincoln. We are going to be looking at extending service, and doing so, seeking assistance from senior levels of government to reduce the cost to Lincoln. And we do believe it is an economic driver for our downtown business districts, and I think you're going to hear that from a number of folks that are going to follow me in this presentation. So from a next steps perspective, we will continue to update council regularly. We have throughout this process on a quarterly basis. We do want to proceed with the recommendations as highlighted in the report with one amendment. We have made an amendment to one of the recommendations to make sure that it's clear that any sort of human resource, human contribution is clearly identified as contractual in nature, so it doesn't commit council. And as I've said a few times during this presentation, should policy changes arise at a provincial level regarding gas tax, we will be before you with alternative recommendations. So thank you, and both Director Graham and I are here to take any questions committee may have.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike, for the presentation, and we are tying in the report here at the same time, so if we can tie in the report with questions and tackle that at the same time, so that would be PW 18-23 Ulink Transit Pilot Quarterly Update Report. Who's up for questions? Councillor Brunet?
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Through you to the CAO. So, Mike, just a couple of comments on your presentation. You know, when we went down the road to launch this, I believe some of the numbers that we talked about that would be a success at the end of the first pilot project was a 1,500 ridership. And so to think that we've gone over 2,000 with 3 full months left, I think we would all agree this has been a success in many, many ways. So, you know, when we look at the economic development, the 80-page economic development report that we're going to see later this evening, you know, it's kind of ironic that we see at the top of the page where it says Lincoln's top weaknesses and challenges related to economic development. And from the survey, over 55%, the number one response was public transportation. So when we launched this, you know, we looked at giving mobility freedom to our residents, and I think we've achieved that. But I think we've achieved much more than that. And you look at the demographics and the people that we've touched. So in many ways, this has been a success. I think it would be a missed opportunity if we don't look at extending this. So I look to fully support this report this evening. I met with the CAO of Albright Manor earlier this week. They made a decision when we launched not to have a stop in front of Albright Manor. I can tell you if we extend this, they're going to look at having a stop right out in front and not even behind at Idleheim. So that's a great news story for those 231 residents at Albright Manor. So it's just, it's a great story. We've embraced transit. We've got Metrolink stopping at the bottom of Ontario Street with a bus stop 12. We've got enhancements to that stop. We're showing them that we need a GO bus stop in the future on phase 2, and we're going to continue to push for that. So I'll be fully supportive of this report as we move forward, and thank you for the report, for the presentation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could just thank Councillor Brunet for his comments and highlight, there are some statistics. We looked at other transit services that were introduced. We looked at Niagara on the Lake. We looked at Fort Erie, and a number of you will recall I personally rode the Pelham bus when I first started this position, just to get an idea of what the service was. What each of those 3 places told us on average was that 2 to 3 riders per day would be success. That's what they averaged in their first year. So I can tell you we're doing significantly better than the others. It is, as I said earlier, about putting, as Metrolinx likes to say, bums in the seats, and sometimes that education, that training, that bringing people along on this transit journey doesn't happen as quickly as we all would like, but we're definitely seeing that uptake. If you read some of the comments you have in your testimonials, you'll see the predictability of the service, continuing the service is one of the key themes that you're hearing.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity through you to CAO Krikopoulos. In the funding model that allows for the 75% funding from the province, does it restrict us with regards to generating revenue in other ways? Are there any levels that if we hit those levels that we would lose our funding opportunity from them?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, Councillor, that's the exact question we asked ourselves. Could we look at sponsorship? Could we look at advertising? Those were things that some of the other jurisdictions did, but they did it to complement a fair. They didn't do it in place of a fair. So what we heard very clearly from the province, from representatives of the province, and I think Angela's nodding in agreement, is that the fair piece is integral. It is important, but as we talked with them, that could be $1 per round trip. That doesn't need to be something that makes it cost prohibitive, and it would be something we'd want to talk about with stakeholders before we set any particular amount. But that was something we looked at, because we looked at, could we sponsor it, could we do other things to allow the transit service to continue but not introduce a fare, and it was pretty clear that any of that would be supplemental to the fare.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we didn't begin a fair charge, because I think that's a smart move from a financial standpoint. But I just was concerned that if we raise too much money outside of that fair, that they'd want to be clawing some of it back. The other thing is, if we do go down that road, I would like to hope that staff will look into technology options from a standpoint of fair allocation, fair monthly passes, as opposed to tickets and tokens and all that sort of craziness. But I'm really pleased with the report and what's come out from the public on this. I was confident in the beginning that we would see the uptake and that we would see this turn out as a very positive pilot, and I'm just really pleased to see the impact that it's made on some residents' lives. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of comments and then a question. First of all, the financial that you've laid out for us makes an awful lot of sense. And in fact, it's actually kind of pleasing to see that there's opportunities for us to make use of provincial funds to keep costs within this in a good manner. The thing that I've liked about Ulink right from the start. I've been somewhat critical of what's gone on at Niagara Region. I think they've been intruding into areas of municipalities that I don't think they should be intruding into. I'm very happy that this is a local service that we have going in place, so we get to control what it is that is happening with this service, and we can go as big or as small or as basically whatever it is that we want to do with this. And I think this whole pilot project has been a huge success, echoing back to what Councillor Brendas said. Actually, I do have two questions through Mr. Chair. I'd like to know, when we're talking about extending service, kind of what it is that we're thinking of with that. In other words, you know, some of the minor complaints that I have heard within it is that, you know, we have all these multiple routes that are going on, and so therefore there are some pretty extended periods of time when you're trying to go on particular things. So I'm just more curious what the thinking process is with the extending the service.
Through Mr. Chairman, I will start answering that question and turn it over to Director Graham, because I know he's been in steady contact with BTS, who is our service provider. I think when we talk about extending services, we do look at definitely the frequency. So an hour between kind of that full cycle sometimes is too long for some residents. For others, they like 2 hours in between residents, and I think one of the testimonials we have suggested 2 hours is okay. It allows me to grab a coffee, it allows me to go shopping, it allows me to do some of those particular things. So part of it is that. Part of it is also currently we have some areas that have no service and they want service. So it's really a combination of frequency, so the bus coming around a little quicker in some particular areas, and it's also adding a few stops, which may increase, again, how the buses are running. And so I think, you know, what we've looked at from a cost perspective for 2019 does incorporate a good level of increase from a service perspective to address what we believe will be some of the things we've heard. But Director Graham may have some additional comments.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. Through you, Mr. Chairman. I think Mike gave a good overview on that question. And the other thing we want to ensure with tonight's report is that we extend the service that we currently provide as well. It is a pilot program, so you know we're looking for council support to extend the pilot service, so to speak, as well, to ensure that we don't have any service interruption. Because as Mike said earlier in the presentation, initially the pilot was to end this year, so that's one of the main key parts around this, and as well looking at how we can further evaluate our routes and respond to a lot of the comments and requests that we've heard from the public.
You got cut off. Mayor Easton, I'll come back to you. Put your thing in the queue.
Oh, that's, Mr. Chairman, if you...
Well, that's going to have to be the.
Well,
You're on again.
Okay.
You're on again.
Oh, I'm back again. Okay, good. We're learning the system. I'm an IT guy and I still have difficulties. The other thing I was going to ask was concerning other areas that have been doing pilot projects. There has been some really progressive things done across the province by municipalities of our size. I'm thinking of Innisfil in particular, but others as well. And I'm really hoping that as we're moving down the road with this, that we're also outreaching to these other communities and finding out how things are going, because there's opportunities here, I think, to put in place, you know, a hybrid model that I think would really be good for this municipality that meets those needs that we have going. So I guess the question to the CIO is, I'm assuming there is discussions that are going on at some in some background area on some of this with other municipalities, just so that we can really get a good handle on this type of thing.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, and Councillor Foster and I have had a few of these conversations as from his time at AMO and some of the things he's heard. Innisville in particular has an Uber model, and they subsidize each of those trips on Uber to a particular maximum amount. It is a model that we are having conversations and looking at. Your suggestion around some sort of hybrid model, because we have some areas of our community that are far more remote, where it doesn't make sense to run a bus. And so that will be something we continue to look at. I think the Innisville model is an interesting one. We have some regulatory issues from a Niagara region perspective as it relates specifically to Uber, but I think those are things that we can potentially work out should that regulatory framework change in the future.
Councillor Timbers.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the CAO, I think most of the questions I had have been answered, but I do have a couple of comments. I'm very, very happy with the success of this entire program to launch the Ulink. I just thought it was the most exciting thing to happen in our town. And to read the testimonials, it's obviously providing a great service for a lot of people. I had questions around the provincial gas tax funding. So to qualify for that funding, we have to set a fare. And my only comment is that we keep it very affordable for the riders. And at the fee, it just has to be any fee at this point. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct, Councillor. The introduction of a fare, but they haven't set criteria for what that is. They want a demonstrated attempt to recoup some of the operating costs.
Okay, and just one other question. There's also a request for a contract person that would be in charge of this entire program, and instead of someone working off the corner of their desk. So I absolutely support that, and I also support extending this service into the next year. So if you could just outline basically what that contract would entail.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think, Councillor, you probably hit that on the head. We are looking at a contracted service to put together a number of elements of the transit service that we provide right now. Some of it will be outreach, some of it will be the integration with our various agencies, Metrolinx Go, the province of Ontario. Some of it will be very operational in nature. So going out to our facilities, going out to our locations, talking to youth, talking to seniors, talking to the adults, pulling together conversations with our business community, looking at where should we continue the service, where maybe do we cut service down. So I think we haven't hit it on the head in terms of are we providing the right service everywhere. So I think communication will be integral, that engagement will be integral, and we will look at what is the appropriate level of time and commitment that resource needs to be with us and needs to be committed to this particular work. So as I said, this isn't one of these forever and a day type things. Should situations change, should needs change, we will be before you highlighting what that looks like and what that is, and we will continue to provide quarterly updates to committee.
Very good. Yeah, thank you very much. And just one more thing, if I may, Mr. Chair. In one of the letters from one of the residents at Heritage Village, they talked about Ride with Your Councillor Day. I think that's great. I love that. And I see some BIA members here tonight. They also talked about his idea was a loyalty program. So I kind of got thinking about that. The local businesses in town, definitely could benefit from something like that. I mean, that's just my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Have we got anybody else? Have we got your mic on? Oh, sorry. Councillor Brenay, we're over to you again.
Very quickly, Councillor Chair McPherson, I just wanted to make a comment that I just alluded to make it in my earlier comments. Mr. CAO, in your presentation, you made a comment that we've done a good job in communication, and I would never argue that. I think we've gone about this in a very good fashion. We've been very responsive to the citizens and listening to their tweaks and their requests and adding the Saturday schedule. But I can tell you out on the campaign trail over the last 3 weeks that there are still people in this community that are misinformed, that think that we are spending millions of dollars, and those are the words, millions of dollars on transit. And, you know, I think we need to reiterate, we need to communicate that we have not bought buses. We are not spending, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on fuel and drivers. This is an RFP that we put out, and we've invested $143,000. And that is our commitment, and we looked at it as a pilot project, and now we are looking at this in a proper and professional and business-like manner to see if we can renew this. And again, we're listening to the public, we're listening to those people that are using it to make an informed decision. So I do believe we have done a good job in communication, but there are always those people out there that say they don't know what's happening. So we need to continue on those lines of communication. That's just a quick comment. Thank you very much.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think that is an important comment to highlight in terms of cost. I can tell you our colleagues, my colleagues to the west in Grimsby were looking at a different service. They were looking at acquisition from a capital perspective of buses, and I think sometimes when you read media, when you read stories, sometimes that, you know, what you're hearing in one place can sometimes apply to another place. That isn't the case. You're correct. This is a strictly outsourced service. I did present to the Grimsby Transit Committee a while back. You know, I talked about this as a very basic and rudimentary service, and it was about kind of growing the conversation, growing the demand for transit. We did start off very basic. The 13-month costs will be $143,000 in terms of what you have for the duration of the pilot that takes us to the end of this year. It is not $1 million service. And so I think that is an important point. Communication, as much as I suggested we did a good job, I think you can never communicate enough. So we will definitely be out there communicating the operational elements of this, but I think it is important with this many folks in the audience, with the media here, to definitely highlight what this service has cost us and what it hasn't cost us.
Councillor Regima.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I want to 100% say that we need to take this forward and realize the benefits of the groundwork that we've laid. The economic, social, and health benefits to me are very, very clear. It's all quality of life. 100% we can feel confident that we're doing the right thing. I'm in full support, and I'm very proud of the decisions that have been made and the model that we decided to move forward with. So I want to thank staff, and I want to thank everybody in the community that supported it. Very proud. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mayor Easton, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. One, I've listed as the youth factor, and I'm curious, Mr. Chairman, if there's been any discussion with DSBN about how we could increase ridership by some changes in their own routes. I think it was Councillor Renee that talked about this a few months ago, this whole layering effect, where if you're going to do something, you have to reach out to the broadest audience and just see what starts to fall into place. And I feel that there is an opportunity to strike a deal with DSBN that would help us improve our ridership.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think specifically to the mayor's question around outreach to DSBN, we have had some outreach to DSBN. We did some outreach sessions actually in BDSS here locally. DSBN has been very supportive. There are other municipalities in Niagara where DSBN is supporting more financially. Service and service provision. I think the conversations we'd like to have moving forward would be around what does that extended service look like, what is the frequency of the service, and how does it dovetail to some of their needs. But definitely we would be continuing the outreach that we've begun with DSBN, more consultation in the schools. Right now, I think as I highlighted in the presentation, we have about 22% of the ridership is youth. Some of that definitely is frequency time. And so again, as we look at the service, as we look at making some tweaks, that may be one element that increases that 22%.
Okay, well, Mr. Chairman, you know, it sounds like as if we want ridership, we're going to have to, you know, put some effort into the flexibility of what we're offering. But I'm glad to hear that that's in the mix. And I'm curious, Mr. Chairman, through you, were there any discussions about partnerships with the Grimsby or West Lincoln? It doesn't seem very efficient for everybody to be operating their own pilots when maybe they could come together and make this work, make it more viable in terms of getting people in the bus.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, specifically to the outreach, we did have conversations both with Grimsby and West Lincoln. I can tell you West Lincoln is much more interested in looking at, is there a cost-sharing piece? Is there a piece that would help service folks above the escarpment that could be a benefit to us, but could also be a benefit to West Lincoln? So there's definitely a willingness to have the conversation as we move forward, as we look at next term. Grimsby, we did have those conversations. Like I said, they invited me to present to their transit committee. They did put on hold any decisions relative to transit. They were looking at a much more extensive service initially. So I think they'll be back visiting it in the 2019-2020 time horizon, and I think those are the conversations that absolutely we're open to having that. I think about community assets like West Lincoln Memorial Hospital and how potentially maybe we would want to cross boundaries. I think about the potential new school that's coming that is on the border of Grimsby and Lincoln. I think about the Y that is there. So there is that ability to do some of that kind of cross-boundary connections, but definitely a conversation we'd like to have with Grimsby moving forward, should they be interested. So I think, you know, we're a willing participant. We'll take willing partner. It'll take willing partners around the table. But I think at a high level, they've expressed some interest.
Mr. Chairman, I realize that we're not focusing on the pureness of this report, but when you have this number of people in the audience, it's helpful, I think, to have some discussion that goes beyond just the bare bones. I think we would be remiss as well if we didn't look at the environmental considerations around the bus. You know, with few people riding it at one time, and my question to the CAO through you is whether there was any consideration given to a hybrid bus, or what's being looked at there.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I can tell you what drove our initial request for proposals was really cost. How do we keep costs low? How do we introduce a basic service that, from a low-cost perspective, introduces transit into our community? I think moving forward, are those all considerations that we would look at potentially? Are there different types of buses? Are there different types of opportunities from an environmental standpoint? Absolutely. I think cost will always be one of those balances we look at. What is the cost of enhancing the type of bus? I do want to just clarify for folks, we don't have a massive bus. It is a smaller bus, so I harken back to Councillor Brunet's comment around communication and making sure people are aware. It's a very modest bus. That could be something we look at, should uptake increase. But at this particular point in time, cost is what initially had driven keeping the type of bus we're using low. But that doesn't prohibit us, Mayor Easton, from looking at potentially when we put a new RFP out, are there some other more environmentally friendly options that we could look at?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chairman, I just want to, I think it's very difficult not to support the way this is being handled. However, I'm not impressed with the political messaging that is out there because of the risk that the people who do use it are faced if we make a precipitous decision. To say that something costs $1 million when it doesn't even cost anywhere near that is really quite irresponsible. So I hope that that we'll be able to get some accurate information out on the street so that everybody understands exactly what the model is here, because clearly that is not what's being repeated at the moment. Thank you very much. It was a great report, and I'm really pleased to see how effectively this is going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike and Dave, and my only comment would be that, you know, a lot of great comments around the table. The other thing that we can't forget is the speed with which this council and this staff put this on the road. You know, I think that if you look at our neighbors to the west, and they, you know, looked at it and looked at it and looked at it, and in the end decided not to do anything. You know, it was virtually within months of the idea coming to council and, you know, having rubber on the road. And, you know, many times we get criticized for taking too much time, and sometimes that's rightly so. But in this case, you know, it was done, and we were out there, and it was servicing our residents as quickly as we possibly could get it out there. And from all indications, it's been a good program and a success. So congratulations to you and your staff that were involved, Carrie and Dave, and our partnership with Brock University, and that part of it that really helped drive this when we decided to do it. So.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your comments. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Director Graham and Ms. Beatty, who's not here this evening, but Director Graham for really taking this and running with it, and all the staff. I also want to thank Council for your support. I agree with you. We've moved at warp speed on this. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, it's these types of projects that probably get me a little more excited. Not that I don't like subdivisions and some of the other things our staff does, but these are the stuff that give back to community, and that should be the things that we're working on in addition to some of the general work we do. So I appreciate those comments, and we'll share them with staff.
Okay, so I have a motion moved by Councillor Timbers and seconded by Councillor Brennan that report PW 18-23 Ulink Transit Pilot Quarterly Update Report be received for information, and that Committee of the Whole Economic Development Committee recommend that Council approve the following changes to the Ulink service. Extend the current service contract with BTS Network Inc. for a transitional term of no more than 1 year to ensure no interruption in service. Approve in principle transitioning from a pilot to a permanent service to leverage and qualify for the provincial gas tax funding to help offset the operating costs. Approve a contract transit resource as outlined in the report to support this new municipal service for the community. And approve that a rider fare / revenue generation option be established to come into effect in January 2019 to allow the town to qualify for provincial gas tax funding. Any questions to the motion? Seeing none, your pleasure on the motion. That is carried. There's been a recorded vote requested, so I will hand it over to the clerk. While we were waiting for that, thank you folks for coming out tonight, and safe drive home. There's their driver right there.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. We're going to have the recorded vote, and when I call the name, I'd like each member to say yay or nay. Councillor Brunet?
Yay.
Councillor Foster? Councillor McMillan is absent, therefore his vote is cancelled. Councillor McPherson? Councillor Pachariva is absent. Councillor Rajima? Councillor Thompson?
Yay.
Councillor Timbers?
Yay.
Mayor Easton? The vote is carried.
Very good, thank you. And we are going to take, we're going to take 5 minutes before we get into the active report and strategy. So please come back by 5 to 9, please. Thank you. Oh,
So when
wow.
when they turn it off, it'll go to the. So here's the thing. When a councillor goes to speak, right? The camera should be on that councillor speaking, and then as soon as the delegation is ready to answer.
See this red ring?
Yep.
Turns on, your mic's on, and when you're done speaking, like if you answer a question or whatever, when you're done, you should.
That's interesting. It's a lot of on and off. That's a lot of on and off. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm gonna also. Yeah. Okay, if we could take our seats, please. Okay. Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be nice. All right, we will pick it up again. And just for those I got a few lessons on the microphone and how it works, and we're working through this. Brand new to all of us, so if you are a presenter, if you would please turn your mic off when you are getting a question, so that the camera can follow the microphone that's on. I know that could be challenging, but do your presentation, and then when you open up for questions, turn your mic off. When the question is made, then you can turn your mic back on. And for councillors, please, as you're answering or as you're asking questions, making comments, leave your mic on. Don't have it off and on, because you'll lose your spot in the queue. Okay, so for the councillors, remember to leave your mic on and finish. Even when the presenter's answering you, leave it on. Okay, we're all good? All right, next we have Sierra Planning and Management Consultants and Global Investment Attraction Group regarding Report AD 18-11. Please come forward and proceed with your presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. And we do have our Economic Development Officer, Paul Deaney, to make introductions.
Yes,
Take it away,
thank
Paul.
you, Chair. Through you to the committee, I will be brief. I will introduce our presenters this evening, but I just wanted to quickly make a couple comments before we get into the presentation. Obviously, we're very excited to be here this evening presenting our 5-year Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan to the committee this evening. I have had the pleasure to meet with every councillor to walk through the document. and to present or to walk through the document and talk about, what our strategy is and what our action plan is going to be for the next 5 years. So this plan is a foundational document. It's going to lay the groundwork for economic growth and development in the town of Lincoln for the next 5 years. It's key to remember that this document was not done in isolation. We've had extensive consultation with both the public, council, staff, and members of the business community. So this document was done with their input as well. At the end of the day, the goal is to hit the ground running for this document. So we don't want something that's going to sit on the shelf for the next 5 years. In fact, we've already started hitting the ground running on that. So further that, I'd like to introduce John Hack from from Sierra Planning and Management, Al Kent, and in addition as well, we have John Tennant, Bill Elliott, and Kelly O'Brien from GIAG. So John, over to you, and I look forward to making some wrap-up comments at the end.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of Committee of the Whole. It's our pleasure very much to come forward with the recommendations, the plan itself. In the interest of time, we have about 30 slides. What we will do is we will try and give as much time for question and answer as possible. There's a lot of material on those slides. We may wish to reference back under Q&A, so forgive us for moving relatively quickly through the slides. If I move them. There we go. These are our slides you've actually seen before, the first few of them. So it is actually a three-part exercise. It is an economic development strategy. It is a community improvement plan for the employment areas, which has then been expanded to the rural areas. And it also is an employment land assessment in terms of whether or not you have enough employment land going forward. So that's integral to the strategy. I won't go through the scope of work in a lot of details. We are at the point where we've been in front of you several times now, and we're back with the exception of the CIP, we're back with all of our materials. The group, as you know, it's two specialized firms, which I think has helped the process in providing good value added through the entire exercise, consultation and written materials as well. I'm not sure what is happening there with that. Let's move it off the screen. Consultation was key on all of our pieces. It's still ongoing on the CIP, in as much as when the Community Improvement Plan is drafted, we need to bring it back to council for its review, then we need to go to the public, and that's part of a statutory process. And then it would be, if approved, it would go forward. But internal, external consultation has been key. We're happy to answer any questions on that. So in terms of the work plans, the economic development strategy, all of our work started just before Christmas. Extensive background research, so a lot of primary research, as we call it, alongside the analysis of the census data. Very interesting presentation earlier this evening. Obviously, as you know, the work that we've got goes into the census, goes into a lot of detail on material that originates from the census, but is specific to the economy as well. And then into final reporting, and here we are today. Similarly, for the CAP, it's really gone in lockstep with that. I'll get into the details of it, but again, it's a lot of research and review, stakeholder discussions, and working extensively with the town and town staff. And I do want to just sort of put a nod of thanks to town staff who, getting information on land supply, servicing, all of the zoning matters, etc. That is it's complex matters, and we were ably assisted by the town. So I wanted to mention that. Project updates. Onto this. Let me just go through. Sorry, that is where I will stop, I think, and I will ask John to come forward. John Tennant of Global Investment Attraction Group.
Mr. Chair, Your Worship, councillors, I'm going to address the economic development tripartite piece. We're here now following all the earlier building blocks that were involved, and may we say one of these steps was a very, very helpful session with all of you. Get going.
This one here.
Oh, thank you. There we go. The strategy and action plan focuses on 6 principal economic development roles, and then later 4 main sectors of focus. And in each of these 10 areas, we've got goals, objectives, actions, with against each of those comments on funding, performance metrics, priorities, timing, and lead and partners.
Maybe not rest the reminder on there.
Yes, there we are.
There we go. Okay.
The first of the 6 roles centers on municipal economic development priorities and policies. In economic development and other parlance, this is about being open for business. The first of the 3 objectives here is the way in which the town pursues economic development. And some of the key actions include adopting a business expediter role, by which the economic development officer ensures the timely, seamless handling of each prospect's need through to a final decision. It's not just the town's processes, but through all levels of the required approvals. The strategy also describes how a development approval flowchart that summarizes all these steps can support this. Also, working collaboratively with colleagues to advance and realize main development priorities, which of course relate to downtown revitalization, the secondary plans that you've approved, and promoting and monitoring the CIPs. The second objective here is to ensure that the proactive economic development program which you've launched is fully economic development and investment ready. When you open your doors for business, the staff should be up to speed and the shelves should be stocked. The strategy enumerates what's required in this respect. The third objective encourages what you've already started, which is consciously reaching out to stakeholder groups, people who you want to hear from and value and heed their advice. The hope for outcome over time is that you build a consensus around your assets, why it's a great place to do business, as well as the challenges and how everybody's working to address them. You know you're beginning to achieve this objective when outsiders come to Lincoln and say, gee, I was impressed that everybody in Lincoln seems to be singing from the same song sheet. This is really getting the act together. So, the other 5 roles, let me touch on them much more briefly. Business retention and expansion, you recognize as foundational. It's keeping the existing businesses you have and growing them. And it's more than just listening and supporting them. They're going to be the most important sources of information for outsiders about what is really going on in Lincoln. Are you open for business? They're also going to help you identify supply chain opportunities and gaps that could attract new business. Entrepreneurship and innovation, that's what powers competitiveness in a community, makes for dynamic, vibrant economies that will adapt and grow. And with accelerating change today, that is vital. A community, businesses, agriculture ventures that aspire to be on the leading edge. Not just fast adopters, but leaders in responding to the opportunities in the community. It involves working to get culture change. You've got Spark Lincoln, which can be a hub, but there are other things that are also needed in this area of innovation and entrepreneurship. Investment attraction, that centers on active and targeted collaboration as part of Team Niagara. The key task for Lincoln is to make a compelling case for this town through robust value propositions in well-targeted subsectors and niches, places where you've got a demonstrable advantage. Why Lincoln? Talent and workforce is incredibly critical today. Highly qualified people are the assets that I think you know every organization, virtually every organization is seeking and having a hard time finding. So collaborative, in-depth analysis and joint initiatives are probably the key way to go with the region, with the Niagara Workforce Planning Board. Public transit, thank you, came up very much in this area. How do you get people to work? You're paying attention. The marketing role, the strategy emphasizes that websites are the essential economic development tool. Around it, various other e-marketing tools that tie in. Prospects don't call you first. They go online. So the website is your window to the world. We recommend in the strategy further strengthening of the placement and content and ultimately working towards a standalone website. Moving now to the sectors of focus. Just a preface to make sure you understand that you're on the right track here in understanding that today sectors are really being eclipsed by technology platforms. The strategy and action plan emphasizes that these platform technologies, digitally based, cut across all sectors. They're blurring lines, they're driving change, they're prompting disruption. So advanced technologies have become pervasive to greenhouses, vertical farming, the cannabis production. It provides critical information on crop protection and harvesting decisions. Your idea of Lincoln as a center of excellence for agriculture very much fits. All of these areas are interlinked. The strategy also comments on the growth of services employment, along with expanding services functions and service businesses associated with manufacturing. There's a sea change that's happening and will continue in the economy. So that's ahead. Looking at the actions that are recommended in the 4 sectors of focus, of course, primary agricultural producers need your support and advocacy on the issues of importance to them, funding opportunities, and we think it's evident that you've been paying attention. The arrival of cannabis producers racing to be ready for this recreational market is very consequential in terms of likely change. And the economic development impact is and will be significant. The key question is, where are the value add and supply chain opportunities, and can Lincoln benefit from these? Second area, value added agriculture, food, beverages. The strategy doesn't just look at the possibilities for attracting further processing, because the other value-added avenue too that generates additional revenue for producers is to expand direct access locally to more consumers. And of course, the town can play a helpful role. Thirdly, tourism. Huge potential, and Lincoln has unquestionably great assets. It's a burgeoning market, but it's a very competitive, very complex, constantly evolving field. To realize the potential, we think that the town needs to make a commitment to this sector, and to inform the decisions that you need to take, an in-depth tourism strategy is needed. From a municipal point of view, there really are two areas to consider, distinct but interrelated. One, the most fundamental one, is the town's role in tourism capacity building, developing infrastructure and assets, working and supporting the businesses that benefit from tourism. In short, creating the product and the experiences that are going to attract visitors. The second one is supporting the most impactful and effective destination marketing. What will bring the tourism sector the best returns on the overall marketing investment, which you're already contributing? This, of course, gets into the complex world of branding. It's important to get this right. You need a comprehensive and reliable analysis that are going to inform your decisions and lead you to make a wholehearted commitment to be involved in a way that's going to benefit everyone. Finally, among the sectors, manufacturing. It's grown in Lincoln over the last 5 years. In fact, at a rate higher than the region, or well ahead of Ontario. It's mainly about beverages. A third of your manufacturing employment is in that area. The strategy and action plan suggests, though, that there's considerable opportunity in the further development of manufacturing, technical services to meet the needs of agriculture and agro-related ventures, cannabis, greenhouses, wine and viticulture, and tree fruits and berries. So this gets very much this circular involvement, the interrelatedness that you're thinking of with the concept of a center of excellence for agriculture. Finally, you'll find in the strategy and action plan a summary commentary on sort of phasing the implementation and the timing and nature of the budget and human resource implications that are throughout the strategy and action plan. The main consideration in implementation is to get the basics in place before you start to run off. You need to build on that base and have it in place. And we're recommending the tourism strategy be tackled as soon as possible, i.e. This coming year. As to resources, a full-time economic development assistance is recommended for next year. We also give considerable emphasis to the website, though, as I mentioned before, that's a question of phasing to going to a standalone presentation. So that's a snapshot. Thank you very much for all the help that you gave us in doing this, and we're available along with the others to chat more.
Great. Thank you, John. So moving on to the employment land supply and demand analysis, which is a distinct piece of work. Before I get started on the slides on this, it's important to ask, you know, why the focus? What's the issue? Why do we have to look at employment land supply? It is a planning issue. It's an economic development issue, but it's a planning issue in that the province, through the provincial policy statement, seeks to have municipalities maintain an adequate supply of so-called employment land. So just a couple of definitional things. You know, we are looking at this as employment and trying to map it to where employment should go and whether or not you have enough land for that. But we need to recognize that it's not quite as simple as employment on employment land versus what they call population-related employment. It can get very confusing. So just to give you an example, the idea is that employment that needs to be protected is that which is sort of wealth creating, that doesn't just meet the needs of the local population. So it's not the hairstylist or the local accountant that works only for people residing in the area, but is creating services that go well beyond, that may be manufacturing things that get shipped, maybe distribution, transportation, or it could be tourism. You know, tourism brings, you export tourism, people come in. So it's not serving a local population. But tourism doesn't occur in your industrial areas, not generally. And so you need to recognize that what we're telling you here in terms of land needs and supply, you have to have that context around it, that as we show that you need more employment land, don't think for a moment that it therefore is a doom and gloom position. It's not. And you just heard from John Tennant that the drive towards services is important, but it's not necessarily services only for local people. It's the service economy, which itself is much more than manufacturing and traditional employment. So I just want to sort of set that out to begin with. But to get down to the sort of brass tacks of this, how much land do you have that is defined as being industrial, which allows for manufacturing, warehousing, offices, and a range of ancillary uses, so the retail or restaurants that you have in industrial areas as well. But it's not the Walmarts, it's not the retail areas, the commercial areas proper. So that is really a distinction there. Then what is the demand? And I'll talk about the demand, and then does the future hold, and what does that mean in terms of policy changes that you'd need to bring on board? And this, this is not just words on a page, it is work that should go along with what you saw on the economic development strategy in terms of implementation, how you get changes done. It relates to the employment land community improvement plan that we're talking about and the achievement of some of the goals of the ECDEV strategy. So, without going into inordinate detail here, I want to give you, this is the supply of land which is zoned in the industrial, and it allows for offices and industry, manufacturing, etc. So the majority of it is located in Beamsville. There is an addition in the Prudhome's area. Industrial sites, about 13 of those, and 22, almost 23 hectares overall. That's in net terms, and the gross, which is undevelopable land, would be well, sorry, that's not on here. This is the amount of land that is developable for those uses. So the industrial lands, 12.66, and then the office commercial lands, which is a specific zoning category that has been created that allows for offices and commercial, doesn't allow for industry, industrial zoning. That adds another significant amount of supply as well. So to give you some examples there, this is the split that we're talking about. You can see there on screen, this is obviously Beamsville, top of Ontario Street at the QEW, and the office, commercial and industrial zonings there being split out. And they were split out, as you know, through the regional secondary plan exercise for the GO Transit Station. Okay, so just to remind everyone what that means is that then isolates industrial to one area and focuses the area around the interchange for quote-unquote higher order land uses that might include major offices and other kinds of commercial development. That impacts our findings quite significantly. In terms of parcel size, this is all about quality as well. It's not just about quantity. It's about whether or not you have enough land to be competitive. And I can't underestimate that, but I also shouldn't overstate it. It is what it is. You're in a part of the province that has a number of very important provincial plans in place that restrict the amount of land that you can develop. You have a lot of prime agricultural land, so it's not as if you can just go out and dedicate land for industrial. So it has to be recognized as such. But looking at the status of the land parcels there, let me just deal with servicing firstly. The industrial lands, through our work with the town staff, it's pretty much fully serviced, meaning that it's ready to go, save for the developer actually, running the pipe into the property. But it's there. That's not quite the case for the office commercial lands. They have a little less capacity in terms of whether they're fully versus partially serviced. But looking at the parcel size, if you look at the industrial there, top left-hand corner, you have less than 1 hectare in size. So that's less than 2.5 acres in size. That parcel might work for a type of use, but if you're trying to have the maximum leverage for site selectors to be able to say, come in, we have a lot of lands that you can develop. you're going to want to have some of the larger parcels, or at least parcels which are individually small but contiguous next to one another, so they can be amalgamated. You know, those 9 industrial parcels are not really, they're not contiguous, but 70% of the parcels are you know, less than 1 hectare in size. Only 15% are more than 2 hectares in size. So that's just a qualitative note that you know, in an ideal world, you would have any municipality would want to have a larger complement of bigger sites to deal with. There's just some mapping there just to show you. This is really from the OP, from the secondary plan exercise. That's you know, on the right hand side, it remains essentially industrial. On the left hand side, more vacant sites around the interchange, and a number of underutilized sites there as well. But a lot of land, you know, if you come back in 20 years, the question is how much of this will be developed. There's a lot of development land that can be developed here. So, on to the demand. I don't want to get into details. We can address it in Q&A, but essentially trying to nail down what we think the demand is for different kinds of employment uses in the future. As you can appreciate, you know, I may have one opinion, pull in 2 other consultants, and you'll have 2 other opinions on what it might be. So we're trying to get general guidelines. So the first thing we've done, we've looked at what the region has said is the amount of land, the amount of employment that's going to occur on your, more or less on your industrial land. So that's one element. Then we looked at the consultants that work that has been done on your development charges, that has also similarly said how much is going to occur essentially on your industrial lands. And then we've done our own assessment where we look at the kinds of employment growth that we think are going to happen, and we ask ourselves questions: is that likely to happen on industrial land, or is it likely to be something that occurs on your commercial lands elsewhere? And our sort of analysis, you know, no surprises, it kind of comes down the middle in terms of what that is. So these are the amounts of, the numbers of people over the period to 2041, number of jobs, I should say, that might be expected. And then, not all jobs, but just the jobs that are relevant to this category of employment. And then what you then have to do is ask yourself a subsequent question, which is very, again, is subjective, but we've done it on the basis of good research. What is the likely density of people? How many jobs are you going to put per hectare? And there is a range, and you need to have a range, anywhere from 20 to 40 jobs. That results in, when you apply that to the existing supply, and then one more sort of technical feature is that you can't have it so that everything washes out, you have enough land to meet your demand and everything's fine. You need to always have a supply. You've always got to have spare land. It's how the rental housing market works. You have to have frictional vacancy. You have to have the ability for people to move and to come in. So we've added on an estimate, and it's just an arbitrary figure, but about 15% of the supply that needs to be free to always allow the system to work. What that basically boils down to is that there can be quite a stark difference in the number of or the deficit of industrial land. So the conclusion of our work is you do, based on these projections, any of these projections, whether they're ours or the other consultants, there is going to be a deficit of industrial land over the period to 2041. And as a result of that, the ranges vary, and I would be my advice to everyone would be focus not on the precise numbers, but on the conclusions here that you could do with more and better industrial sites, if that is a possibility. So depending on the kinds of scenario, if you take scenario 1, anywhere from 15 to 40 hectares being a deficit, under our middle scenario there, anywhere from 11 to 30 hectares. And then if you're very aggressive, meaning that you think there's very small demand relative to the supply, anywhere from 5 to 18 hectares deficit. The last couple of just bullets at the bottom of that page remain important because there is this distinction between, part of the employment growth is so-called employment that happens on industrial land, but there's also that other general category of population related. And as I said, it can get confusing. I think those that work in this whole field of employment land analysis have to recognize that there are some very things which are not clear cut. In other words, some of the offices, some of the things that we're calling population related, meaning serving a local population, they're not. They're employment related, and they could happen anywhere. They can happen in a retail area on a second floor. They can happen on Main Street on a second floor or an office. Those other lands that you've got, the ones which have been redesignated around the Beamsville interchange there, that land is sufficient to accommodate all of that future growth. And then if you add the Prudhome's secondary plan area in there as well, that too can accommodate the demand, including that which is potentially for major offices. So if I haven't lost everyone, and it's quite understandable if I have, I'll move on to what the recommendations are that we want to go through, and I'll just read these through. They are land use planning policies. So you have a deficit. We need to see what we can do to, but you have a deficit of industrial land, but you probably have quite a significant surplus of office land. So how do you square that circle? Well, recommendation one is protect that which you have. So the idea of a prime employment area really comes from the region looking to protect clear opportunities for industrial style uses. So that's the first recommendation. The second one is, we created 3 scenarios there of potential demand. I think as the region has just done its analysis, they've literally just published some of their work. Staff will need to just keep a diary entry to check in with the region and their consultants as to how those numbers may change. And then, one of the most important recommendations is, when you look at the absorptions, what we call the absorptions, so how much land has been developed over the last few years, it's not a great deal of the industrial variety. And so that recommendation 3 is, despite all the analysis people do, focus on how, what's coming to town, why is it coming to town, what's happening, is it expansion, is it organic growth, or are there opportunities to bring in new businesses, and is that generating demand for employment land? And if it is, monitor it, because that is the most effective thing that you can do. Fourth, monitor the effectiveness of the existing office commercial designation and consider widening the scope for industrial uses. So as you can see from our numbers, that was formerly, that allowed you to have industrial uses. So if those industrial uses were remaining on those lands, there would be much less of a deficit. The issue is that industrial type uses are not permitted at this point, and so we wonder aloud, and we recognize that the ink is still wet on the secondary plan, but is there a way to consider widening some of the scope, at least for some of the sites, to permit uses that fall more into that employment land category? Another one, of course, is recommendation 5, consider settlement boundary extension. We have to assume that that's pretty difficult to do. It's a long-term proposition to bring lands in on that basis. Recommendation 6, implement the employment lands and rural areas CIP, leveraging regional funding as possible. That's an important one. I'll leave some comments on that to the CIP. Recommendation 7, review availability of publicly owned employment lands. So, this building is a good example, is on the industrial lands. Facilitate delivery of required infrastructure. So that's good housekeeping, working with the region on all issues. And then just something that came out of some of the work and the consultation we did, streamline coordination, pre-application approvals and process. Just to make, again, the open for business approach to assist expediting projects. Okay, on to the Employment Lands and Rural Areas CIP. So I'm not going to dwell on the purpose of the CIP other than to say that there are, you have 3 CIPs, and they've had, they have been quite successful. I know there are some questions about the rate of take-up of some of the applications. If you look at least the numbers we have in terms of how much you've had to spend of your money and the region's money in funding those applications versus the construction value that's come in, the ratio is something like 13 to 1 in favor of construction. So by no means is that shabby. That is actually far higher than we often see in other Main Street type CIPs. So that's good news. The Employment Land CIP, the idea here is you're going to focus on fewer applications, probably bigger ticket expenditures. And so the idea of leveraging regional support is really key to making the CIP work. Okay, in the rural areas, really the emphasis there is that, agricultural diversification, whatever it might be. It may be on-farm retail, but it may be putting in types of uses that, for whatever reason, fall out of the agricultural category. They still are approved in zoning, but they require DCs, and they're otherwise creating an impediment to investment. So, from an economic development perspective, being nimble and being able to apply good judgment to support the right kind of development that might occur elsewhere. In terms of the community improvement plan area or project area, which is a legislative requirement before you actually do the CIP, the entire municipality is included with the exception of Prudhome's. And to the extent that the jurisdiction falls to the Niagara Escarpment Commission, for example, that doesn't preclude you from doing the programs of financial support. To the extent that a site is better suited to support under your existing CIPs, there will be language in the CIP that makes it very clear that that's the case. So what we are doing is moving forward, just to give you an indication of some of the issues. An employment CIP, if we came back in 2 or 3 years' time, gave you an update on how successful it's been, you might have 3, 4, 5 applications. That's all. It might, the actual ask and the amount of development that's happened could be, the amount of development that happens could be recorded in the millions of dollars. Your assistance may be in the hundreds of thousands. So to give you an example there, an industrial building, 25,000 GFA, if that all of that attracts DCs, that's a cost to you to fund it, whether you fund it through a reserve or just exchange when they pay the DC, give them the grant back, and otherwise have to fund it from elsewhere. That's $140,000 there, right there. A new office building is even more. And so there is a question which is ongoing, and we're working with staff on whether you should be pursuing supporting offices, major office development, or whether the fact of the GO station, as an example, is a sufficient future incentive for that kind of land use. So, this does come down to municipal fiscal choices that you as members of council will have to make in subsequent years. Types of programs, it's going to be to get the bigger ticket items, it's a tax increment grant, it's a development charge equivalent grant that might go back. In the rural areas, there's more scope for any number of small improvements, facade improvements, signage, even feasibility type grants that you could have as well. So we're working to draft the CIP just after the election. So sometime in realistically in November there would be a draft that can be reviewed by this committee or at the appropriate time when this committee would meet. And then as soon as we can, go out to statutory public meeting and council approval, and that's a process under the Planning Act in early 2019. And there, some of the things that we're looking on there is to make sure that we align this with the best opportunity to get regional assistance. So that's it. Thank you for your patience, and we as a team are happy to field any questions. And I'll turn this off at this point.
Okay, thank you. So we have 3 documents there. I think that we know that the ECDev strategy is 84 pages of material and then 30-odd pages of appendix. So that is a big document on its own. And then we have the employment lands and we have the CIP. 2? Just 2 tonight? I think he talked to 3, didn't he? No? All right, two documents that we've got. Would you like to make comment, Mr. Deanne?
Chair, through you, I will add some comment at the end and answer questions where need be, but thank you.
All right, well, let's turn it over to the council. Councillor Foster, you're first up.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. A couple of comments as it's going on. And first of all, thank you very much for taking us through, and the summarized version is really quite good to go through and get the general gist for everybody what's going on. A couple of comments on things, and this is, I guess, all things being equal, this is probably one of the last meetings I'm going to be involved with things around planning and stuff like that, which this just generally is, as well as I won't be back on council next time around, although possibly elsewhere. But so there was a couple of things that you mentioned through here that I think is really important. You hit right at the very beginning on the idea of technology. And it's you know, the massive change that's going on within society just by itself. And you're talking about, you know, the expectations and stuff like that that are going on. I think there's something that has to be kept in mind too, like, you know, and I've talked to Mr. Kirkopoulos about this many times, but you know, it's a matter of, at the municipality level, changing our thinking about what we are going into the future. All companies are becoming technology companies. Municipalities are no different. And if we're going to be leading with our economic development within the community, we have to start at town hall as well. Like, I think some foundational pieces of the puzzle have to be thought through and moving us into the future as well with that. That's a huge challenge for all the senior staff that are here. I mean, you know, things are changing, and they have to change at the municipal level. Anyway, I'm glad that was a key part of what was in this. Secondly, you talked specifically about industrial land and some of the focus in and around that. This council's been pretty good at not doing it, but I've been on this council for a while, and there have been changes to zoning in areas that have been questionable, to say the least, as we were going through them. And I think part of the economic development strategy has to be almost a challenge to council to not go for the first. It's like, you know, make sure that you're staying with those zonings and stuff like that require you to go into the future. So, in other words, if somebody comes along and has this great idea to take something out of industrial but end up with a residential and a commercial and stuff like that, maybe that's not the thing council should be doing. Maybe they should be sitting back. And you've stated very clearly with this, we don't have the land, so sometimes maybe it's better to think some of those things through. So I'm liking what I'm hearing within within the strategy. Just the third thing that I wanted to just briefly mention, and with economic development, is the growth of this community has been pretty incredible for a number of years as you were doing your research. You know, when I first got on council, this was the fastest growing municipality in Niagara. We're still, if not the fastest, one of the fastest growing within Niagara as well. So there's been a lot of development that's been happening. But the region has not been really identifying or understanding what it is that we're doing. Like the last official plan that came through and the information that we had, for all intents and purposes, said, you guys in the north and the west, you go to it, but we care about the south because, you know, that's where we're going to invest all of our time and invest all of our money. And guess what? They were absolutely wrong. The development has been going on here and has been developing, you know, like crazy, and the rest of the Niagara area is not developing. Go to Welland, go to Port Colborne, go to Thorold. These places aren't doing it. So, so I think what has been laid out, and I think all members of council have done a tremendous job of getting those strong views into this. And I think you guys have captured those very well and what you gained from the community as well. So I applaud you on that. So thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Thank you very much for this presentation. When I received the original package, I went, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here, which is fantastic because it's an awful lot of work. So thank you for doing that heavy lifting. Obviously, thank you to staff as well for expediting this. And I want to speak to the customer service focus that we've had and how that not only translates from our customer service focus to our residents, but also the customer service focus to businesses that are coming into our community. I'm so pleased to see the thought about a business expediter and having the key concept of being open for business. Getting from the start of the process with that new prospect all the way to the startup of operation and seeing that business come to, you know, a flourishing kind of a situation, that is key. You know, you let go in the middle of the process and things tend to go off the rails. So I'm very pleased by that. I will pick up a little bit on what Councillor Foster was referring to with technology. Certainly council in the future is going to have to invest in the technology to keep us on the cutting edge if we want to be at that cutting edge of marketing our community as open for business. I do have one question with regards to the employment lands and the industrial lands and whatnot. Who are we going to allocate or assign or allocate, or who's going to drive the policy change that's necessary with regards to changing and converting lands from, you know, into the industrial lands? Is it going to be planning or ECDEV or a combination platter, or is there going to be more staff required in order to do that, or is that something that we have the capacity to handle?
So yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's a good question. So I think the first thing to recognise is, I said at the beginning, this whole idea of employment has to go into industrial areas, you know, in order to be wealth creating, and that is kind of old school thinking in some ways, but at the same time, you've got to protect those lands. Having, you know, moved to have the secondary plan in place around where the GO transit station will be, you know, those are good moves in that they create the opportunity. If you look at the list of uses that can go in there, they're major offices, you know, and a range of other commercial stuff that is not necessarily stuff which would happen in industry. You know, yes, industrial uses, you know, specifically were excluded from that. So I don't think it's necessarily a case of saying you've got to reverse this. You just got to think clearly about what then now needs to happen, because if we currently have a situation where the region just came out with estimates of where, not estimates, targets, so as I read it, policy targets for where major offices should be developed. And Lincoln has 0 allocation. And so as a result of that, you have a series of designations that give you the opportunity to go after some of those types of land uses. So I think it's far from a case of just trying to sort of change the zoning. It's that we have to ask ourselves the question, what can happen in those buildings? You know, and can you entice a development company to come in and build somewhat speculatively to create an environment where you can stack, you know, a number of kinds of office uses that are employment, you know, true employment uses, as opposed to, you know, other kinds of, you know, resident-serving employment, local neighborhood employment. It can happen there. So I think that's what you have to do. And so firstly, it's a conversation between planning, economic development has to be in the room. and colleagues at the regional level. And then where it goes from there in terms of sponsoring changes or your interpretation of zoning when it comes time to doing applications, that's one thing. The other thing is the CIP. I think we have a decision to make in doing the CIP. Do we incent officers or do we not? You know, do we turn on the CIP for those uses right now, or do we write them in, but maybe our focus is the other employment lands first, but then gradually turn our attention to that. And that's all stuff that's homegrown in as much as it's entirely within your control. You want to make sure you meet the opportunities under the SNP program, you know, the regional program. If you can meld all that together and keep control of it, that I think is the aim.
So we're going to actually end up having to advocate to the region to maintain the SNP programs, because there's some conversation in and around those. And we're actually going to have to sort of, I'm going to say force our will or impose our will on what we want to happen in our community more with the region, because obviously the region, you know, their record of what they think is going to go where and when hasn't been all that accurate. So,
well, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, the region is a partner. You know, part of the reason for doing this study through part of the MCR process is that you have this kind of analysis that you can take back to the region and say, this is where we're at. You know, what are the solutions for it? So I do think the benefit of this kind of work, along with an ECDEV strategy, is you can go with you know, a good sense of what Lincoln can achieve in the next 5 years and work that into a regional strategy. So I just don't want to paint it as if it's, you know, go off in a completely different direction. I think the goal of this was to be able to speak the same language as the region in terms of looking at things like land needs, and from that see where you can amend it. But on the offices, for example, if you've got zero allocation of major offices, either that needs to change or you just need to decide whether you want to go after it anyway. You know, so that comes down to you.
yeah, I just find it interesting that they sort of think that we should have none. It's maybe just we haven't been vocal enough in our desire as to what directions we do want to go in. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Councillor Regima?
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I was going to ask a little bit about what Councillor Thompson just referred to, and that's that I read somewhere that the region is looking at pulling back and reviewing its SNP program. So are we taking that into consideration when we, at this point, or how seriously are we taking that?
You, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question. I'm going to defer to Al if you have any comments on the regional program. And if we don't, we'll clearly tell you that. But if you do, have knowledge that I don't.
Only insofar as that if you can maximise the opportunity through SNP, then it obviously makes the programme a lot more sort of incentivised. I noted what you said as well in terms of whether or not they might be restricting. I know it's under review, but if there is any way in which you can try and press for it to be, as you've mentioned, Councillor Thompson's mentioned, to keep it going, then you really should do. Mm-hmm. But other than that, you're correct.
Yeah, and just to add, you know, it's not a bad program, right? I mean, if you look around where some of the other sort of upper level governments are assisting lower tiers, some of them work very well, some don't necessarily work that well. So, you know, work with what you have, monitor it in terms of review, and advocate for maintaining sufficient access for this.
I think Mr. Bruder has a comment with regard to that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to confirm too, you know, both economic development and planning have been already engaging with our counterparts at the region to advocate to keep the SNP funding. We've provided extensive input as to why it's necessary for, you know, our particular municipality, and I think other municipalities within the region are doing similar things as well. So I just wanted to highlight that point, that is in fact ongoing.
Good to know, thank you.
Councillor Timbers.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the delegation. Thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to, one thing that kind of jumped out at me is under the sectors of focus, and tourism is a piece of that. But one of the recommendations was that the town make a commitment to doing a tourism strategy. And I'm just wondering how those two are going to work together. I don't know if you have any comments on how we would proceed. And also the town's role in tourism. I don't know if you could comment on that.
The context, I think, is this. Tourism is an area in which Lincoln has incredible assets. It's a major growth area. The typical fundamental foundational municipal role is enabling and working with capacity building. All of the infrastructure. Earlier this evening you've had Parks and Recreation and Culture Master Plan. That's a link to what is happening as well, and can play into the tourism field. There are many things to bring together. There are an incredible number of businesses in any community that has tourism as part of its raison d'etre. It touches many businesses. Sometimes it's a modest part of their business, but it's that very important sweetener that makes business profitable that might not otherwise be. So this is really in economic development and extended to tourism, which is part of economic development, a very key role. Wayfinding signage is another key aspect of it. So that's one part of the whole equation that I think you need to have people who are incredibly expert and are asked to devote time to it to help you chart what kind of actions, investment, and things you need to be doing. Then there's the task of marketing, destination marketing, which there are certainly all kinds of different models as to how destination marketing is undertaken. It includes towns doing it themselves, but very commonly, as is currently the case in this area, having partnerships. 20 Valley Tourism Association as a destination marketing entity whose job is marketing what the community has, and often these extend to non-municipal boundary areas because tourism doesn't necessarily follow municipal boundaries. So you're really players in what is an important industry, and if you're going to take decisions that you're comfortable with, that you feel well informed about, and make that kind of commitment of your resources into a package of things that's going to grow tourism in this community, we believe that you should take the time to do a strategy in that particular area, so that you have that information. Am I getting at
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
And I think we've tried to lay out in the strategy some of the considerations in this area, but certainly in doing a broad strategy, that wasn't something that the sufficient time could be devoted to give you like really hard suggestions, the options, and the background information.
That's very good. Thank you very much. That does help. Yes, thank you.
Mary Stan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I, as well as a lot of people around this table, have watched pretty energetic plans, probably over the last 2 decades, come forward at many levels of government. And this is really one that is going to challenge us. These reports are absolutely of no value if we put our foot down and then decide 2 years from now that we're not going to follow through. This is a very complicated process. And I guess I've watched a few things at the region that makes me feel very nervous about us not knowing exactly what it is that we want to do before we start having a discussion with them. And I'll go to the statistics around agriculture, which are still tied in with other industries that, you know, we really don't have much fishing going on in this area. There really isn't a lot of forestry. There's some, but for some reason or other, and I've spoken to this on a number of occasions, there is no regard for the fact that an industry as large as agriculture deserves to have an accurate set of data, and we don't. So you see the same old list. It's just the same recital, and you think, well, you know, what are we really talking about here? Is there really a sincerity involved in addressing the biggest piece of our economy? And I think that's something that we're going to have to address as a town, because Niagara is still looking for the next big industry. And maybe one day it will come. But in the meantime, what do we think should be happening here? And we can only do that with the people that are in all the different in the different businesses. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm very excited about the proposition that we would that we have done this work, but I want to seriously caution that if our plan is to enter into this with some sort of emotional idea that this is going to be a panacea, we really have to stop that immediately. This is going to require a very significant investment, a very good investment, and I think that we can do it with the right guidance. I don't know who those I don't know who the people are that are going to guide us through this. I think it's going to be layers and layers of skill. But I just wonder, Mr. Presenter, what you have to say about that, because I'm not accepting this as a nice report. I'm accepting this as some serious business here for the town, and if we don't enter it with a very serious view that it can impact our future, then we may have wasted our money. Not because you didn't provide us with the right information. And I see that happen. People get nervous and they stop investing.
Yeah, no, through you, Mr. Chair, no, 100%. And I think, to quote Alexander Graham Bell, which is sometimes I do in this, is just say, I think he said, vision without execution is hallucination. So just on that approach is that, we do need to look at the action plans. Now, if your comments are more to the ACTEV strategy than the land reconciliation piece, I'll just defer to either Kelly on the statistics and John on some of those implementation items, just to maybe just field that question.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to dwell on this, because I actually think that I believe that we need to have much more education around this. And we do need to look at all these elements, because in some areas we are not making progress. We can't even get accurate statistics. How can you take a report seriously when we keep going back to what the province have decided those statistics should look like? We need to have our own statistics.
Well, through you, if I could just check, because on that, I think that's one item we could probably just get a comment from Kelly, who had done that sector analysis, which I think would be helpful. So let me introduce Kelly O'Brien from GA.
You're probably familiar with the earlier report, the interim report, that included the economic base analysis. And what you said is correct. At the 2-digit NAICS level, agriculture is combined with hunting and fishing. However, we've gone further beyond that to the 4-digit NAICS level. So we do have data on farms, farm wholesalers, wholesaling operations, and so on. But beyond that, there is data from the Census of Agriculture, which is quite detailed on the farming sector in terms of the acreage, crops, farming practices, and so on. So we try to detail that in the interim report. Some of it is included in this final report. However, the details are a part of the earlier report.
All right, well, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the answer, but quite frankly, I think that when reports come forward to our community, they do need to reflect what's going on here. It's not just about the theoretical framework. And so that's my opinion, that's what I believe, and I've seen this happening over the last 2 years coming out of the region, and we're not making any progress at all. So I think that's something that we're going to have to start taking seriously. Mr. Chairman, I do take the statistics on the land use very, very seriously, because I think we have a big challenge ahead of us. And we certainly don't want to be rezoning land in just on a whim. And I don't believe that we would do that. But again, we have to have a mechanism for having discussions about this, and we have to make sure that the right experts are there. I think it was Bill that made a comment at one of the previous meetings that led me to believe that he wasn't really going to sit back and watch us dither around with solutions. And so I kept looking in this document for what are those risks? What are the risks that a person like Bill would say, you know, you're going down the wrong road. You're not putting enough emphasis here, or you're not treating this with the level of seriousness that you should. So I'm just being a curmudgeon at the moment because I don't want us to look at this as a nice report. I want us to really digest this thing. And I don't know, Mr. Chairman, whether these gentlemen and lady are the experts, what our plan is for the future, but I don't want us to just have a planning discussion about it. I want to have a serious discussion about what we're going to do about land. What are we going to do about land along the Queen Elizabeth? Because the developers are all lined up. So that's just my ranting for a bit, but I just take this so seriously. It's a grand opportunity. I hope that we're going to have the expertise to help us.
Well, and so if I can just respond through you, Mr. Chair, I think, you know, we certainly don't see it as you know, a negative on what we're doing. And we agree with you. I think, you know, these reports remain, you know, reports that sit on shelves unless we actually ask ourselves, what does it mean? And we've, on the land supply issue, we've you know, put an array of recommendations from down. How, you know, how aggressively you go after some of those options, that is the next conversation. And so, no, well, I think we're very much on board with you taking that stance on the report. Let's get into the details. If we can do that, then you start to move it forward. If you do accept it, you know, as at face value without looking at the implementation, yeah, it's a challenge. So I thank you for those comments. I'm sure my colleagues do as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
If I may, I would just add to that you know, looking at this document, you know, to me, it's high level. And you're throwing everything into this thing. I mean, if you look at, you've got, you know, 6 what you call development roles, and then you've got 4 sectors of focus, and you've got probably 6 or 7 actions out of every one of those things. So you've got what, 30, 40 items here that many of them are meaty. Many of them are, you know, take an investment. So it's not something that you know, is done in a year. It may be, I mean, even 5 years to do this whole thing is going to be a challenge. But I think what it does give us is a bit of a roadmap that says, okay, how are we going to boil this down? And what are the measurables? And what are the timelines? And what are we doing first? And what are we doing next? You know, so it's more of a, here's the book, you know, here's what we assess where Lincoln is at today, and here's what you need to do to be successful in your economic development strategy. And then we need to go away. I mean, the first thing that jumps out at me is, what's your value? What is your value proposition? And how are you going to articulate that value proposition? So, you know, we need to define that, you know, and then we need to boil it down into, if it happens to be tourism that we pick first, what is the tourism strategy, and what are the actions that we need to put in place? Leave everything else on the 84 pages alone. Let's focus on that first, and then what are we doing to implement that? Then move on from there. So I appreciate you know, the Mayor's comments, but you know, I do see this as a high level workable document that then challenges us, and it does challenge us from a budget standpoint, no question about it, but challenges us to then isolate down to how do you build from where we are today to 5 years from now, when we're going and, you know, really moving along the economic development road. So just my 2 cents.
Well said, and this concept action is what of course you're focused on, and that's marvelous. But in the strategy and action plan, definitely 5 years is the horizon, and that's why we have not only priorities, but timing, and we talk about partners, and of course there's the commentary on performance metrics, funding aspects, and so forth that we hope will be helpful in guiding through. The normal framework is to have a strategy and action plan, and then to look at annual business plans that fall under that. And apart from keeping the strategy up to date, but the business plan is where your rubber hits the road annually and really looks at the budget situation.
Do we have any other questions? All good. Mr. Deanne?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the committee, I just wanted to obviously thank Sierra Planning and Management and Global Investment Traction Group for their presentation this evening. It's been a pleasure to work with them over the course of almost a year to get this strategy on paper and presented to Council. I mean, further to the comments around the horseshoe this evening, it is a strategy and action plan that will guide our work over the next 5 years. I mean, we're definitely, along with my colleagues in planning and around the senior management team in here at Town Hall, we're looking forward to hitting the rubber when it comes to this action plan and strategy. And in addition to that, the next steps on this is we're going to obviously take the executive summary of this document and create a synthesized executive summary that includes some graphics that we can then share with the community to make sure that we can communicate our strategy out. In addition to that, we are looking at a little bit of a roadshow come January 2019, speaking with the stakeholders in the community, the business stakeholders, to talk about our strategy and what our goals are for 2019 and so on. In addition to that, there was some mention obviously about the tourism strategy. So we will be looking to hit the road on that as well when it comes to an RFP come the fall and award that in the new year. That will include the action or the strategy, a wayfinding signage, and a gateway signage as well. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you for the presentations. I have a motion moved by Councillor Regima, pardon me, and seconded by Councillor Foster, that the presentation from Sierra Planning and Management Consultants and Global Investment Attraction Group be received for information. Pleasure on the motion. And that is carried. And lastly on the agenda, but certainly not least on the agenda, we have Dr. Ray Darchie and Stephanie Hicks from the Downtown Beansville BIA regarding report CS 18-04. Dr. Ray Darchie and Stephanie Hicks, you're here. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to Council, Mayor, and staff for being here and inviting us here this evening. We're excited to present to you again today. I don't think we've been here since the spring. There's a lot of updates to be made and let you know what the BI has been up to since that time. I think it fits in with what the theme of the evening is in terms of economic development. So I present Stephanie Hicks to present for us tonight, and here she is.
Thank you, Dr. Ray Darchie. I concur on your statements. Actually, it's kind of fitting that our presentation is last because we got to enjoy all the previous presentations, which all kind of tied into the role of the BIA in some way or another. So it's great that we have that information to report back to the board and the members. Thank you for having us here as well to present today. It is quite fitting that we are here at this time of year. Normally a BIA does come to council at the end of the year before submitting their next annual budget, and with this being an election year, this is perfect timing on our behalf to be here and give you kind of it's a 7-month recap for myself since I've been here last in what we have done, and let you know the direction that we are going. So on February 21st, myself presented to council along with Dr. Ray Darchie, the chair of our board, on the needed changes that needed to happen of the operation of the downtown in order to fulfill our mandate and the strategic planning moving forward. The 2018 work plan that we presented was to make things easy, and the BIA would examine how to enhance, engage, educate, provide events and exploring, economic development, and expand our downtown. These next few slides will show you where we are at in our BIA transformation. Enhance. Looking at ways the BIA could enhance existing beautification, we started exploring community partnerships that would enhance our beautification, engage youth and members in the community and within the downtown. If you look at that first picture at the top there, there's our Barrels Bloom project. That was a project where 7 downtown businesses came together along with 8 wineries, Bench Brewery, our local high school, the specialist high skills major horticulture department, as well as the art students at BDSS, to create this project to bring beautification into the downtown, as well as highlight our local wineries. With that project, we submitted it through Garden Days Canada, and we were actually successful in becoming the flagship project for all of Ontario to enjoy. The next graphic you will see there is a community chalkboard that is launching on September 29th. That is a project of part of a larger event called Lincoln Rerouted that the BIA as well as the Community Services Department with the Town of Lincoln have been working on. This particular community chalkboard is 20 feet long and 8 feet high. It has many community partners with it, and it's going in a particular spot to beautify our downtown in between the brand name Shoes and Home Hardware. That particular spot in April we did a survey, and that location, that vacant space, was one that came up time and time again, that people wanted to see something happen. And although this is not a brick and mortar taking place here, it is a beautification project, a temporary parquet, so to speak. It's going to have Adirondack chairs, an accessible picnic table, another picnic table, and just a great place that people can go, let us know why they love Lincoln, and spend time in our downtown. And then the other picture there is a banner. So another issue that came up in our survey was the property of 5002 King Street. It has a large 80-foot banner that is quite dated. It's a little torn. It's very faded. It took the BIA, contacted the owners of that property, and we just rebranded, which I will touch on shortly. However, they have agreed to recover that fencing with an 80-foot banner with our brand new branding, as well as a welcome message into our downtown. Just going to move this up. Engage. In March 2018, the BIA launched a monthly newsletter. It was full of information about the downtown, about the happenings around town, Ontario BIAs, a monthly calendar, and overall fun facts. The intention of the newsletter was to be quarterly. However, based on the positive response, it is now a monthly newsletter. Our social media is growing. We are active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We rebranded, looking to lose our old dated logo. Our old logo was very corporate. The font was not accessible as well. And we wanted a branding that went away from the BIA as an organization, but focused more on downtown as a destination. So the board sat down and picked up what was around us. We picked up on the bench branding, not only within the businesses in our downtown, however, the surrounding wineries. And our slogan is, so we are now the downtown bench, and we saved you a seat. Benches are well known to be in downtowns. People come and have a seat on a bench, so it was quite fitting. We do have a new website launching soon. It will be in October, and as the previous presenters to us said, your website is the window to the world. So our website will be a great tool for our members. It will have a full directory on it that our members can use, and we'll be able to use it to promote our downtown. Education. Educating the membership on the role of the BIA resulted in the following. We grew the board from 3 people, which included our counselor on our board, Councillor McPherson, to 6 people. Non-board members started attending our meetings. We have held public information sessions. We have an AGM ready to happen in January. More businesses are aware of the town SIP programs and understanding that the BIA must pull forward from 1978. That is a common thread when we talk to the members. They are ready for it as well. Educating the community on the BIA has resulted in the following. We have an increased interest on social media. We have a high readership in our monthly newsletter, and the local paper is interested in the activities of the BIA. And there's just some headlines that what we've made so far in 7 months. Events and exploring. We want to get people exploring our downtown. So the first thing we did was look at the Beamsville Farmers Market, which was an already existing event. We changed the location, which was a huge success. So it used to be up on Beam Street. It was not accessible. We changed it to the Fleming Center, which is it's a great space there. Huge parking lot. Our vendors enjoy it. We increased the vendors. Prior to this year, we had about 3 to 5 vendors. We now have a constant 14 roster of vendors at our farmers market, and then some doing some cameos in between there, which it goes till October 13th if anyone is interested in coming. We also launched the farmers market on social media. We have a Christmas market coming up. It is the first time we are doing this. We have partnered with the community services on the town tree lighting, and we will be putting a Christmas market in the upstairs of the Fleming Center. A lot of our farm vendors and craft vendors will be at that market, but it will be great enhancement to the tree lighting as well as be a great benefit to our membership and to the community. Events we have partnered on so far, Lincoln Rerouted I mentioned, which is September 29th from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Lots of events happening during that day. We've partnered with Economic Development on Doors Open, not only promoting it, but also as part of the planning process. Canines for Compassion is a group that is actually doing a walkathon this Saturday, and we've partnered with them at the Fleming Center. The farmers market is their halfway point. They'll have the Humane Society out with some animals for adoption. Paul Max, which is a downtown member, will be there handing out some swag, as well as our own vendors will be enhancing what they have for the walkers and our furry friends. And then the community cycling celebration, which happened in June. Economic development. We created a database of all current members with pertinent information, such as their websites, their address, the key contacts, the owners. There have been facade updates in the downtown. If anyone has been there recently, the white building in between Dean Allston and Tallman Funeral Homes has a great gray facelift and beautiful windows. 4 businesses have opened. This is since February when I was here. We've had one-on-one meetings with business owners, the executive director, and the economic development officer, Mr. Deaney, to assist businesses in understanding and applying for the CIPs. Marketing and promotion for downtown. Business members to increase foot traffic. So we've been heavy on the social media to get people to come into downtown and engage with us online. And renewed optimism among the downtown members. Which leads us to the last E, which would be expand. To continue on our path of moving the downtown forward, we are at expansion. From the beginning, we were aware that this was a year-long process, and we are exactly where we need to be in this process. We have completed the following work. We've worked with OBIA and other BIAs on the expansion process, gathering their best practices. We've worked with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. We've worked with the town's clerk and economic development officer, as well as, I should add to that, planning, bylaws, and finance have been phenomenal as well. So thank you all for all of your help in getting us this far. We have engaged the current and proposed businesses. We've held public meetings about expansion and process. We included information about expansion in our monthly newsletters, several of them. We mailed out an informative 14-page package on the expansion to both the current and the proposed businesses. We held one-on-one meetings with both current and proposed businesses, collected letters of support for the boundary expansion. I do have letters of support right here, and they will be circulated through the clerk's department to yourselves. But we've had we have letters of support from great members, including DeSantis Homes, Court Holdings, Mike Camiso's Incorporation, Your Neighborhood Pizza. So what is next for the BIA? The Beamsville BIA moves towards becoming self-sufficient. We listen to our members and work with them on things such as parking, events, promotion of businesses, growth, communication, beautification, marketing the downtown bench as a destination. We continue our relationship with our community partners. We continue to enhance our relationship with the town and the region, and we apply for grants. When I was here presenting in February, we didn't have a business number, so we weren't able to apply for grants. The season of grants is among us, and I'm happy to report that we do have a business number and we're fully registered. Thank you. So I will leave it to questions.
Okay, thank you, Ray and Stephanie. Is there questions, Councillor Bernay?
Thank you, Chair McPherson. To the presenters, I just had one question, and I completely understand, and I'm not trying to be critical in any way, but I understand, we are talking about a downtown BIA, but we are looking at expanding the catchment area, and completely concur that after 41 years, it's long overdue. So the expansion that I've seen, and I stand to be corrected, but the expansion that I've seen swings all the way over to, is it Mountain View Road, or how far does it go to the west? So Mountain View Road to the west and Bartlett to the east, and then heading down towards the Queenie. I believe, from what I've seen, the line would stop at John Street to incorporate the Tim Hortons there. So I'm just wondering, I realize we are talking about a downtown BIA, but we are expanding it quite far to the west and the east, which I'm actually embracing. But I'm wondering why we're stopping at John Street. Why not go all the way down to the service road to incorporate the gateway?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The board did discuss that. One of the reasons why our catchment area, so first I'll address why it looks the way it does, and I thank you for supporting the way we are proposing it, is that this is a lengthy process and we do not want to have to do it again in another 5, even 10 years. What the downtown may look like that many years from now could be extremely different. So we want to make sure that we're capturing certain areas such as BDSS High School, the Fleming Center. There has been ask from particular businesses such as Smoke and Moonshine, with the region having some plans there with the roads. We really feel that those ways would be gateways. As far as addressing why not go further down Ontario, I will be quite honest with you, that is a lot of businesses for one BIA to take on. So there would be, that you would absolutely have to have more staff in that. And it's a different look and almost a different mandate. There have been discussions that perhaps those Ontario Street businesses could possibly form their own BIA and be a gateway BIA. I think there's plenty of opportunity personally for the, with all the downtowns that we do have, for there to be more than one BIA in the town of Lincoln. It's common in municipalities to have more than one. So it's just a matter of fit, our mandate, and that it is a lot for one BIA to encompass that many businesses. Right now we're at 44 businesses and we're proposing to go to 70. So to add that many more in would be a huge number.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Because I wasn't the first, the question got stolen, but that's okay. I just really appreciate the work that's been done.
You're not fast enough on the
I'm
mic.
not quick enough on the draw tonight. It's getting warm over here. I'm a little slower. But I just really want to thank you guys because when we started this term of council, there really was no BIA to speak of that was, active in doing things, and just the whole total change in what's gone on has been nothing shy of remarkable. So, and certainly things have really sped up significantly since you've come on board, and I really appreciate seeing this, and I can't wait to see how we can duplicate this as we move towards the east end of the town. So, thank you very much.
Quickly, just without the support of council and staff and everybody here, I don't think we'd be where we are today, so we want to thank you for your support to get here today as well. Thank you. Councillor Foster.
So, a couple of things, and having been the board member for BIA back on my early time on council as well, I don't actually agree with Councillor Thompson's statement. The BIA is certainly changing into something that I think it's a lot more than what it used to be. And from that point of view, I totally agree. Like, I think the progress is being made down the line in the right direction. I have a question, perhaps Stephanie, you've been involved with this through Mr. Chair, and also maybe to staff as well. I'm curious about the process that we're going to go through with doing the expansion, because an awful lot of the area that's being brought in actually encompasses residential as well. So my question is, who are actually the people that can or would put in questions on this? Like for instance, if I owned a house on Central Avenue and that's coming into the BIA, obviously I'm not going to get taxed, or I'm not going to get the fee for being on the BIA, but I'm just wondering if people that are there can also lodge objections. Like I'm trying to figure out what the process is. Is it the rateable people that have the objection, or is it everybody within that catchment area has an opportunity to lodge on this? And I think, and the only reason I'm asking is as we go down the road with this is that this could be very tricky from you know, who's doing what and how this is all moving forward. And I don't want you guys to get hung up on things like if all of a sudden everybody on Central Avenue says, oh my God, I don't want this, and sends it in, you know, you guys may end up having you know, negatives that really aren't appropriate. But anyway, so a question through to staff with that.
Through to you, Julie. Have you got this?
I do. Thank you.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. Thanks for your question. The notice is provided by the Clerk's Department, and the notice would be going to all commercial or industrial property. So any of those. It doesn't necessarily encompass residential. So the commercial or industrial properties would be captured.
You lost the mic. Go back. Click it again.
Click.
There
There we go. So, so actually, but there are some properties that are residential, but they also have other zoning on them that's going down Ontario Street as well. So, again, a question on that is whether or not they are appropriate. Because I think there could be concerns as that's going on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Deanne, do you have a comment on this? Is that what you wanted to chime in on?
I did. Thank you, Chair. Through you to the councillor. Further to the clerk's comment, and I believe Ms. Hicks had mentioned it as well. I mean, the goal of this expanded area, yes, it does include a lot of residential area, but I mean, further to what Ms. Hicks had mentioned is you know, the boundary 40 years ago, or the downtown 40 years ago does not look like what it does today. So the idea being is in 40 years, does the downtown expand even further? And that would include or capture further or future growth on the commercial side of things.
Yeah. Just,
you still have the floor.
Yep. Just to be clear, I'm completely in agreement with going down the road with this. I think this is the right thing to do, but you know, let's just make sure we dot the I's and cross the T's as we're going through this, just to make sure that everything is done properly. Thank you.
And I would say from the meetings I've been involved in, those are all crossed and dotted, right? There's a lot of work that goes into this. It's not an easy process at all. So, yeah. Is there any other questions from the council? Councillor Rajima.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I want to recognize all the work. I know there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I can see that, and I think we all know that, and we're all very thankful for that, because we know the downtown needs work, and we've been hearing about it for years, and it's a struggle. What do you do? So our economic development officer, Paul Deaney, earlier on mentioned that he brought us all in and talked to us all, and he did. And one of the questions I had, and I'm glad he brought us in because it was a good sort of a precursor to the whole discussion that we had tonight. One of the questions I had was, you know, what's the magic answer? I don't know, but is a strong BIA part of that magic answer? And he said absolutely it is, and that from his research that he's seen it, he can, you know, think of several examples where a strong BIA was definitely part of the magic answer to reviving a downtown. So I'm thankful for the work that you're doing, and I can see the value in it, and I can see it's a lot of hard work, and I'm supportive of what you're doing tonight. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mary Stan, your microphone is on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to congratulate the councillors. Councillor Pachariva was involved in this. I think this was quite a surprise to you that you were going to be dealing with Beamsville BIA,
Yes,
but
it was.
there's nothing like being resilient. So I think the two councillors did a great job. I'm really pleased that the BIA has a good fit now. And I'm just amazed at what you can come up with. Every time you turn around, there's some other wonderful thing happening downtown. So it means that we can really have that vibrancy here, and the same thing will happen with Vineland when we get down that road. But it is a very exciting place to be downtown. There's no question about it. So congratulations, and to also the board, Ray. It's pretty gratifying to see this kind of success. It's great.
And if I could throw my comments out, great to be here, as from where we started. And, congratulations to Ray and to Jennifer back there, and to Carol I see over here. It's been a journey, and I think we're getting some momentum now. And it was wonderful to bring Stephanie on 6 months ago or so, and what's been happening thus far. I mean, we see people like Jillian from the Yoga Vine coming on with all of her energy and all of her, ideas, and that's what we need is new blood coming in and creating a downtown that we can all be proud of. And we're not there, we know that, and we got a ways to go, but little by little. I mean, that building, I drove through downtown and thought, what happened? All of a sudden this white, ugly building has a paint job, and it just takes little things like that to start that investment, encourage people to invest in the downtown. So, we're on the right track. I think, Mike, you had a comment to make.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did want to acknowledge a few people that are here today. I'm still figuring out how to use this mic as well. Anne Murray, who's our chamber ED, she is here. She's been an amazing supporter of WELL, and of course the members of our 20 Valley Tourism Association. I see Aaron here, the new ED. Justin's here, and of course Len, who has been a longtime member of that group. I do want to highlight that we are and continue to have conversations with the 20 Valley Tourism Association, specifically as it relates to the Jordan Merchants Association, as well as some other conversations. I think they're important conversations. One of the comments we heard today is how do we look at BIAs and look at them across our entire municipality. And so I did want to highlight both Justin, Aaron, and Len, who will be part of those conversations as we move forward.
Okay, you can sit down. Thank you very much. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Regima and seconded by Councillor Foster, I hope. Thompson, thank you. That the presentation from Dr. Ray Darchie and Stephanie Hicks on behalf of the Downtown Beamsville BIA be received for information. Your pleasure on the motion? That is carried. And I have a motion moved by Mayor Easton and seconded by Councillor Regima that staff report CS 18-04 requesting for boundary expansion of the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area be received, and that the town clerk be authorized to give notice to the owners of assessed property within the current and proposed expanded business improvement area, BIA, boundaries of Beamsville Downtown Business Association's intention to alter the boundaries, and of council's intention to enact a bylaw to expand the boundaries of the Beamsville BIA as shown on Appendix A. Are there any questions to that motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for a recorded vote, please.
There's a recorded vote requested.
Yeah, just a question on the motion. So what's the timeframe that that's expected to be sending this out and actually make all of this coming into play?
Through you to Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So after ratification on October 1st at Council, there will be a notice provided to the assessed properties on October 2nd. There will be a 60 days in which the duties of the landowner have a duty to notify all the tenants and to notify the clerk of those listed tenants. After that, there's another 30 days in which those people can object and send in their objections to the clerk's office if they object to the notice.
So thank you, Madam Clerk. So just through you again, Mr. Chair, recent experience in dealing with the Heritage Committee and doing designations, there was a lot of confusion put into the community when information was sent out, and of course it really wasn't totally understood. So all I'm going to say is if this is being sent out in this time frame, that there needs to be very clear indication on it, what it truly means to people when it's coming to them. And I hearken back to my earlier questions as well on this particular topic. It's like it is going to a wide catchment area, and I think it just needs to be very, very carefully explained.
Okay. Mike, do you have a comment to that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think specifically to that, we'll ensure that the communication is thorough, robust, and I did want to add, any decision as it relates to the bylaw will be before a new term of council, likely in Q1 of 2019. So yes, we'll be beginning the communication element of what we're doing in the next month, but any decision will be coming back to this council in the first quarter.
And I would also add that I understand completely your reference. I don't see that here, as I see a lot of pre-work being done over several months, as we saw in the presentation. That this should be no surprise to any of the people that we're going out to. So I understand your concern, but I'm confident that this has been handled well to this point. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Councillor Foster, I just wanted to add that once the timelines are met, there will be a joint report that comes back to Council on the recommendation. So just to be very, very clear that we're not passing any bylaw as of yet. We have to go through the process. So I just want to make that clear to Council.
Mr. Chair, I completely understand that, and that has nothing to do with this. The timelines and everything are terrific. I just, okay, let's be perfectly blunt. We're in election season, and one of the things that we really don't need is, things that are out there that people misunderstand and cause grief as we're going through this wonderful season. So thank you.
Mr. Gianni.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, so as Ms. Hicks had identified in her presentation, is that we've been doing a lot of consultation with the existing and proposed members, and the message that we had been reiterating to them is that this is a 100% BI-led initiative. I'm there at the table because I do see, as Councillor Regime had previously mentioned, I do see the benefit of having a fully functioning BIA for the betterment of downtown Beamsville, revitalization and investment attraction. So this consultation that we're doing will continue throughout the 6-day period, and our goal is to speak to everyone, so that way we can educate them on the benefits of this. So that consultation will be ongoing, but just so you know, we have been reiterating that this is a BIA-led initiative.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if you would do the vote, please.
For the recorded vote, I will list your name, and please say yay or nay. Councillor Brunet.
Yay.
Councillor Foster. Councillor Regima. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Timbers.
Yay.
Councillor McPherson.
Yay.
Mayor Easton. And that carries.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I have a motion moved by Councillor Regima, seconded by Councillor Timbers, that report AD 18-11 regarding the Town of Lincoln's Economic Development Strategy and Employment Land Supply Analysis be received for information, and that committee adopt the Town of Lincoln Economic Development Strategy and Action Plan report as our 5-year economic development strategy and action plan for the Town of Lincoln. Are there any questions to the motion? Councillor Foster.
I'd like a recorded vote on this one.
Any other questions to the motion? Just going to prolong this. Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. As the motion was read, when I call your name, please state yay or nay. Councillor Brunet.
Yay.
Councillor Foster. Councillor Regima. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Timbers.
Yay.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes. Yeah.
Mayor Easton. That carries.
Okay, thank you. So that wraps up our reports. Councillor inquiries. Are there any councillor inquiries? Seeing none at 11:15. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. Announcements? None there. I move for adjournment.